Good evening. It is 6:30. Members of council are assembled when you're ready to begin.
Thank you very much, Don. I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores. Welcome all members and everyone watching us by the live stream. We're glad everybody's with us. Second item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement, and the Vice Deputy Mayor has that.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash unceded First Nation. We understand this land holds immense significance to the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. We appreciate those who live and work alongside us today and who continue the traditions of their ancestors as stewards of the land we are privileged to inhabit. We thank them for the contributions they have made in both caring for the land and shaping this community. We commit to truth and reconciliation, to acknowledging the truth about what happened to Indigenous peoples because of colonization, and to reconciliation, which begins with each and every one of us. As a local government and public organization, we are dedicated to learning about Indigenous culture, to fostering a better relationship with First Nations and their people, and we commit ourselves to actions that move us forward on a path to healing along with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation.
Thank you. So the third item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do so anytime if you need to. That moves us all the way down to item 7, reports of municipal officers and committees. And the first one, 7.1, is strong mayor powers implementation, and the clerk has this report.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Charbonneau. On May 1st, the town of Saugeen Shores joined 214 other municipalities in being designated as having strong mayor powers. Mr. John Mascaron is attending this meeting to answer questions of council concerning the legislation and its impact on the town. For the implementation of this legislative change, the mayor and town staff will need to complete certain tasks in the short term, and some can be rolled out over the next few months. Staff will create processes, forms, and templates for mayoral decisions and directions, as well as a repository on the town website for public access to these documents. The confirmatory bylaw and bylaws in general will require the addition of certain language to reflect the mayor's intention concerning vetoing powers. All of these updates are underway and will be implemented shortly. Mayor Charbonneau has indicated his first mayoral decisions that are included in the report. They will be prepared in accordance with the processes and templates that are currently in development. The report identifies midterm implementation tasks concerning the business plan process, impacts on land use planning, and the review of town policies for potential impacts. As this work unfolds, other tasks may need to be advanced to implement the legislation and the decisions or directions of the mayor. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks, and Treasurers of Ontario continue to host information sessions and provide resources to council and staff to ensure a smooth transition. By implementing this legislative change with a slow is smooth and smooth is fast approach, the town can continue to advance its strategic priorities while meeting the legislative requirements of the province. Welcome to respond to any questions that council may have. Thank you. Sorry, and Mr. Mascaron is here to answer questions. John, did you want to say a few words first or just open up the floor to questions?
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm pleased to be here this evening. I actually had a whole PowerPoint presentation all prepared for you, ready to go, but I suppose I can just answer questions if that's what you would like. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm in your hands. I know you've had a full report from your CAO and your clerk. And I did have a look at it, so I know that they've been relatively comprehensive in what they've said to you. I'm prepared to proceed any way that you would like.
Well, I'll ask council, do you want to see Mr. Mascaron's presentation, or you just want to go directly to questions? The council would like to see the presentation, John, so why don't you take us through the presentation?
Terrific. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and council, for that. Let me, if I can share my screen, I hope that I have the rights to do so, Don. Rights to share my screen?
Sorry. Oh. Sorry. Yes, John, you should have the rights to do so.
Okay. I think you've got it up on your screen now. Strong mayor powers?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific. So, Mr. Mayor, I will go through this. I'll give you a little bit of background into the legislation, so to speak, the origin story. We'll talk about what it's proposed to do. The weak mayor system that it seeks to replace, the sources of the strong mayor powers, the rollout, and then I'll get to the actual powers towards the end of the presentation. I will go into those in a little bit more detail. So by way of introduction, I think your municipality, as probably the 169 other municipalities that had been told, hey, you may get strong mayor powers on May the 1st, probably went like, where the heck did this come from? Well, it was the brain thrust of our premier and his brother. They wrote a book, if you can believe it, back in 2016, published by a reputable publisher called Ford Nation, Two Brothers, One Vision. And this quote is actually attributed to our now premier, Doug Ford. If I ever get to the provincial level of politics, municipal affairs is the first thing I would want to change. I think mayors across the province deserve stronger powers, one person in charge with veto power. That was written back in 2016, probably written sometime before that because the book was published 9 years ago. So how did this come to be? Well, if you remember, Rob Ford was the one-term mayor of Toronto, and Doug Ford was a one-term city council member in the city of Toronto. And often, probably more so than you would think, the votes at Toronto City Council were 43-2. You can imagine who the two were, the two Ford brothers standing in a minority. And I think Doug Ford saw his baby brother being stymied as to his vision as to what he wanted to do for the city of Toronto. And of course, he probably looked to the United States, which has a number of strong mayors, a number of cities that have strong mayor powers. The best well-known ones are San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and primarily Chicago, which is probably the prototypical American U.S. strong mayor municipalities. And that's well known to the Ford family because their father, who was a one-term MPP at Queen's Park, had created a very well established company called Deco Labels and Tags. And one of their offices in the United States happens to be in Chicago. So you have a little bit of an origin story there. So then you're looking for, well, how do we get this implemented? You have the excuse, the motive behind this. The Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force, a report from the task force in February of 2022. The first line in the introduction, Ontario's in a housing crisis. Why? All fingers are pointed at municipalities. Development restrictions and zoning bylaws, OP designations, development charges, user fees, planning processing fees, building permit fees. And finally, the enforcement of the Provincial Building Code Act downloaded to municipalities, and it's taking too long to get permits. All reasons why there were problems. Not necessarily reasons to put in strong mayor powers, I would submit to you. However, the province set as its first recommendation a goal of building 1.5 million new homes in 10 years. So by the end of December 2031, Ontario committed to a target of 1.5 million new residential dwelling homes. Okay. Now, why is this important now? Because you've got the traditional, the historic local government system here in Ontario. It's called the weak mayor system, not because the mayors are weaklings, but because of the way the traditional system has been set up here in Ontario since pre-Confederations. Before it was Ontario, it was Upper Canada. And the historical system of local government throughout Canada, and it was emulated in all jurisdictions throughout throughout Canada was a weak mayor system where, yes, the head of council is the ostensible leader of the municipality, is the spokesperson for the municipality, is the person who chairs the meetings where business is conducted. However, the head of council is a leader among equals. Why do I say that? Well, only has a single vote at council and has very limited unilateral executive authority. There is an authority under the criminal code. There is an authority under the Civil Protection and Emergency Management Act, or maybe said that backwards, the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act. And of course, in the Municipal Act, the head of council can expel anyone for being disruptive of a council meeting. Think of a few more. Probably not that many more statutorily granted unilateral powers vested in the office of the mayor. The weak mayor system, as my colleague and I wrote a paper when it was first introduced, and you can probably tell where we sit by the title, we wrote the role of mayor has traditionally been viewed as a consensus builder, one where the head of council must work together in a spirit of cooperation and compromise with the other elected representatives of the municipality, i.e. the elected members of council, to achieve a desired result. Well, that's enshrined in the Municipal Act because the powers of a municipality shall be exercised by its council. That's interesting. It says that right in the municipal. Hasn't changed. Section 5 sub 1 is still there. 5 sub 3 says a municipal power shall be exercised by bylaw unless the municipality is specifically authorized to do otherwise. And let me just cut to the chase. The strong mayor powers is the municipality being specifically authorized to do otherwise, then necessarily proceed only by bylaw. So, strong mayor powers. There are 4 sources to the strong mayor powers. 2 are statutes, 2 are regulations. They must be read together. The Strong Mayors Building Homes Act was first out of the gate. You'll see Bill 3, without any announcement at all by the provincial government. In fact, there was the provincial election in June of 2022. The Ford government won its second majority here in Ontario. It's since won its third in February of this year. There was nothing mentioned during the campaign by any of the parties, much less so by the Premier and his provincial Progressive Conservative Party. Not a mention at all. And yet the third bill out is the Strong Mayors Building Homes Act, a entirely new part added 6.1 to the Municipal Act and to the City of Coda Act, in case you're wondering what Coda stands for, the City of Toronto Act. Special powers and duties of head of council was added to the statute. Then a short time later, Bill 39 was enacted, the ironically entitled Better Municipal Governance Act, where one new additional section was added to Part 6.1 of the Municipal Act, but it's a very significant section, and I will get to it in just a moment. Together with that are 2 regulations. The first regulation is actually how the municipality, how the town of Saugeen Shores actually became a strong mayor municipality. It's because it was designated by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing under Section 284.2 of the Municipal Act, and a regulation was enacted, 4125, on May the 1st, 2025, to designate the town of Saugeen Shores on a list of 169 other municipalities. The regulation also sets out a number of technical rules and procedures for how the strong mayor powers are to be implemented and carried out. And then finally, there is a regulation-making authority, not to the minister, but to cabinet under the statute, 284.9, where the province, the cabinet, can prescribe provincial priorities. And there is a regulation. I will show it to you in just a moment. And there are 3 specific strong mayor powers that can be used exclusively for prescribed provincial priorities. I will show you the regulation, but let me again cut to the chase. What are they? The prescribed provincial priorities of this particular provincial government is housing and infrastructure related to housing. So here's the rollout of the strong mayor powers. It was initially only granted to two municipalities, the cities of Toronto and Ottawa. And that was given to them as a pilot project. That's the exact words that were used by former Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark, and the Premier himself. He said, we're giving it as a test to these two municipalities. Why Ottawa and Toronto? Well, the housing crisis was deemed to be most acute in those two municipalities, and they were in dire need of housing and affordable housing in particular. And they were, in the minister's words, shovel ready. About a year later, 27 additional municipalities were designated to have the strong mayor powers as of Canada Day 2023. How were they selected? Municipalities that were proposed to have growth that would extend their populations over 100,000 persons. Then there was a third tranche. There was an offer given, I believe, to 22 municipalities to essentially come on board if your mayor signs a pledge to commit to the provincial housing construction targets by October the 15th, 2023, then these municipalities would be given the powers as of Halloween of that year. So it was interesting. It was the mayor's pledge. So strong mayors was actually, some powers were given to them even before they became strong mayors. 18 municipalities were designated. So if you're adding all that up, it's 47 municipalities. Then, without an announcement to anyone, no notice given, on April the 9th, the Ontario Newsroom issued a press release, and it said, Ontario proposing to expand strong mayor powers to 169 new municipalities as of May the 1st, 2025. They were proposed to be provided to single and lower tier municipalities with councils of 6 or more members. No longer was there any quota or number about provincial growth, population growth, or population numbers in that municipality. So the first two, Toronto and Ottawa, over 1 million. The next tranche was over 100,000. The third tranche was 50,000. No mention of population projections growth or numbers in these additional now 170 municipalities. How were they chosen? Municipalities that had councils of 6 members or more. The town of Saugeen Shores at 9, well, you're over 6, so you were included on the list, whether you like it or not. And on May the 1st, Mayor Charbonneau, you and probably your staff received a letter from Rob Flack, the current Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, that started like this. Following up the government's announcement on April the 9th, he is pleased to announce that as of today, then May the 1st, the province has extended strong mayor powers to 170 municipalities, which includes your municipality. So that is a bit of the history, the weak mayor system, and then the strong mayor powers rollout. Now, this has come under some criticism. The AMCTO has been very strong in what it said. An organization that I've also helped, the OMAA, the Association of Municipalities, Ontario Municipal Administrators Association, has said strong mayor powers maybe not as good as you think it is, and probably not actually doing what it said it was supposed to be doing. And you'll see that AMO's come out very strong. AMCTO's come out strongly. AMO, not so much. I don't know, kind of lackadaisical in my view about this. Very, very careful in what Amos said. I would expect more of the organization. So, and a number of other entities have spoken either for or against it. Build the Building Association very, very strongly in favor of the strong mayor powers. So now I'm going to get to the actual powers themselves, and I probably will spend just a little bit more time going through here. Strong mayor powers, I've divided them really into three types of categories. I know I've listed four because the last one's a catch-all. The first one I've called administrative powers, and I know in your report they will be called administrative and political powers, and I understand the reason for that. I've typically referred to them as administrative powers. The next set of powers are often called legislative powers. I believe that's how they're referred to in your report. I like to refer to them as provincial priority powers. Why? Because they can only be exercised for provincial priorities. And then there are, and Mr. Mayor, you may take exception to this, I've referred to them on this screen as budget powers, and you might say to me, think you're wrong, it's a budget responsibility or a budget duty, and I would say I can probably concede that to you. And then finally, at the end, after I talked about those three groups, I will then lump in a whole bunch of things about the legislation that you should be made aware of. So starting with the first ones, the administrative powers. The authority to direct municipal employees, that's the actual words that are used, that is used in this section, to undertake research, implement decisions, and to provide advice to the head of council, as well as to the municipality, now belongs to the mayor. Now, if you were reading the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, which was November of 2022, you'll remember that Justice Morocco very clearly expressed this. There is no authority for any member of council, including the head of council, to unilaterally direct any municipal staff to do anything in particular unless they've been delegated specific authority. Well, this is now changed. The head of council now is entitled to direct municipal employees to exercise certain authorities under Part 6.1. Now, when I refer to the strong mayor powers, I'm essentially going to that provision of the Municipal Act, those 16 separate 17 actually, I was right the first time, 17 separate sections in Part 6.1. The head of council is entitled to issue directions to staff to carry out certain functions in relation to Part 6.1 of the Municipal Act. So this turns on its head the very clear wording and instruction that Justice Morocco had given in the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. However, please be clear about this. The authority for mayors is not to direct staff to do just anything. They are entitled to direct staff to do things related to carrying out the roles, responsibilities, and duties and powers under 6.1. Now, in case you're wondering, can the mayor give oral or verbal instructions, directions to staff? The answer is no. All directions that are given under this authority need to be provided in writing, and I will round back up to explain that. So there is some public accountability because if the mayor does give directions to staff to do certain things, then it must be in writing and it has to be provided to the clerk and to the CAO and made available to the public. So your clerk earlier was speaking to this, how mayoral directions will be made public. Now, the next one is one that has received some notoriety. The authority to hire and appoint the municipality's chief administrative officer now resides with the mayor. And you'll see I've actually quoted the section 284.5. The powers of a municipality under Section 229 with respect to the CAO are assigned to the head of council. Number of people have misinterpreted that. They think that what that section says is the powers of a CAO are transferred to the mayor. That's not what it says. It says the powers of the municipality under 229, which is the power to hire and appoint the chief administrative officer, those are assigned to the head of council. And they can be delegated back, and I'll show you the authority for doing so. The authority with respect to the CAO may be delegated back by the mayor back to council. The organizational structure and its determination of how your organization, how the municipal corporation is structured, is now in the mayor's purview. The right to determine the organizational structure of the municipality now belongs to the mayor by statute. Now, organizational structure, not a defined term. I asked my my brilliant employment law partner, Megan Cowan, who I think is watching this evening, so shout out to her. What's organizational structure mean? And Megan said to me, you know, we've looked at this, and it is not a term of art that's commonly used in the context of employment law. Organizational structure, it's not defined in the Act. It's not actually used in any other employment law statute of note. It's not in the Labor Relations Act, not in the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and not in the Employment Standards Act. Why was it chosen? Probably for maximum flexibility. That's what Ms. Cowan and I have determined. Now, in accordance with the organizational structure, the mayor is given an inclusionary power, which is the right to hire and terminate the employment of division heads or officers that are heads of divisions of the municipality. Now, I've written here department heads because to me, that seems to make more sense. That's how I think of municipalities. However, the words division heads is used in the statute. Again, not a defined term. Why was it chosen? Probably for maximum elasticity. Now, the mayor, though, even though it has the power to hire and fire certain division heads, if those division heads are statutory officers, and there is a list of 11 of them, or they are other officers who are required to be appointed under any other act. So just think of weed control officers that must be appointed under the Weeds Control Act. Building inspectors that must be appointed under the Building Code Act, by law enforcement officers under the Provincial Offences Act. Those persons are included. Those persons cannot be terminated, cannot be hired by the mayor. Any existing organizational structure in terms of your municipality that existed on May the 1st remains in place unless the mayor makes a change. And any division head, any person who's in a division head, remains employed together with all of their benefits and entitlements at common law. And they remain there unless they are dismissed by the head of council. So I've been asked, can the head of council remove someone who is a division head but not a statutory officer without cause? The answer is absolutely yes. Then the converse to that is, can the strong mayor remove a division head with impunity? The answer is no, for the very fact that I've just mentioned to you, because if you remove someone from office, they had remained in office and had retained all of their rights and entitlements at law. So if an employee had been working for your municipality for 10, 15, 20 years, they would carry with them their rights at law to notice, severance, and potentially to damages. Okay, so can dismiss without cause, but cannot dismiss with impunity. And it may end up costing a municipality certain amounts if the mayor decides to clean house and replace all the division heads that he or she would like to. The organizational structure of the municipality is allowed to be delegated back to either council or to the CAO. That's specifically an entitlement under the statute. Okay. The next powers, these are the ones that I think might be referred to as political powers in your report to council. Local boards, the right of the strong mayor to appoint the chairs and vice chairs of prescribed local boards. There are none prescribed. So it's an empty shell of a power at this point in time. With respect to committees, there is an authority with particular reference to prescribed committees. And hallelujah, we actually have a definition of what a prescribed committee is. It's in section 4 of OREG 530/22. It means a committee that consists solely of members of council. So it would be what you would commonly refer to as a committee of council. There are no lay persons on the committee, no members of the public. It is a committee comprised only of members of council. In that case, the mayor has the authority to establish and dissolve these committees, to appoint the chairs and vice chairs of these committees, and to set the terms of reference for these prescribed committees. That is there, and there is an ability for the mayor to delegate this back to council. Those are the administrative powers under the statute. Now I'm going to turn to the provincial priority powers. As I indicated, section 284.9 of the statute clearly says that the cabinet, the lieutenant governor in council, has the ability to prescribe provincial priorities. This government has done so. The cabinet has done so. 580.22. Here are the prescribed provincial priorities for 3 sections. They're outlined right in section 1 of the part 6.1. Building 1.5 million new homes and construction and maintaining infrastructure to support the housing, as in transit, roads, utilities, and servicing. Okay, provincial priorities only relates to housing and infrastructure. It's still quite broad, isn't it? Here are the 3 powers. The first power, as you know, every municipality must have a procedure bylaw, which does a number of things, including setting out the rules of engagement for a municipal meeting. How is something brought forward? Does it have to be a new business? Does it have to be in the notice of motion? How is it brought forward? Well, the head of council now has the authority to override the procedure bylaw if the head of council is of the opinion that a matter potentially advances a provincial priority. So there's a lot of words there. First of all, it has to be in the opinion of the mayor. 2, it has to potentially. 3, advance. And 4, a provincial priority. If all of those are met, then the mayor can require council, notwithstanding what the procedure bylaw says, to consider a matter. The mayor cannot require council to vote on the matter, just to consider it. This is in contradistinction to a section that I will show you in 2 more slides. Okay? The second provincial priority is the one that probably received a lot of notoriety as it was first announced. The head of council is entitled to veto any recent, and I'll explain why I've said the word recent, any recent bylaw that the council has enacted either under the Municipal Act, under the Planning Act, or under any prescribed statute. And the regulation prescribes one statute. It prescribes actually Section 2 of the Development Charges Act 1997. So a development charge bylaw. If council has passed a bylaw recently under the Municipal Act, under the Planning Act, or a development charge bylaw, the mayor can veto the bylaw in whole or in part if he is of the opinion that it will potentially interfere with a provincial priority. Okay? So if the mayor sees a bylaw interfering with provincial priorities, the mayor can veto the bylaw. In order to do so, the mayor has 2 days in which to give notice to council of the intention to do so. The veto has to be in writing, and the mayor must provide written reasons within 14 days of the original meeting of council where the bylaw was passed. So when I say a recent bylaw, the mayor cannot go back and say, hey, we passed a development charge bylaw 6 months ago. I'd like to veto the residential development charges in that bylaw because I think they're too high and they inhibit the construction of housing. Can't do so because you can only veto a bylaw that's recently come forward because of the notice provisions and the timing for the veto. Now, what's really interesting, and remember, all of these are supposed to be for building housing. So the mayor can veto council's decision, but council can override the mayor's veto. You will need a 2/3 vote if council wants to override the mayor's veto. In your municipality, the math works out like this. 2/3 of 9 is 6. So you will need a vote of 6 members of council. They are 6 members of council, of a 9-member council, not only the members who are present at the meeting. You, in your municipality, you may have a meeting with only 5 members because Section 237 of the Municipal Act says quorum is achieved if you have a majority of the members there. So you can have a meeting, but if you are seeking to veto the mayor's veto, you will be unsuccessful because you need 6 members. Okay? And the mayor is entitled to vote on the override of the veto. So you've lost 1 vote. Okay, so you're working out of 8 to try to veto the mayor's veto. Finally, the one power that was added by Bill 39 is the corollary to the veto power, which is a power that can veto a bylaw if it interferes with a provincial priority. Here, despite the procedure bylaw, if the mayor is of the opinion that any bylaw under the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and the Development Charges bylaw may potentially advance a provincial priority, may provide for housing or infrastructure related thereto, the bylaw may be proposed, provided the mayor provides supporting reasons, and the mayor can require council to vote. Now, this is a really interesting choice of proceeding here because it says the mayor may require council to vote. And I've been asked, what if quorum is lost? What if people get up to leave? It's mandatory. The mayor can require you. So if you're there, I don't think you can leave. It's really interesting, and I can see some issues coming forward. And here's the one provisions that's been deemed to be wholly undemocratic. I know you can argue about the whole legislation of strong mayors being anti-democratic, but here's the one part. These bylaws to advance provincial priorities that the mayor can bring forward only requires more than 1/3 of a vote of council. In your municipality, 1/3 of 9 is 3. More than 1/3 is 4. So you need a vote of 4. The mayor is included. Presumably, the mayor will vote for the very bylaw that he is proposing, and therefore, you need 4 votes, right? You need 3 plus the mayor. So the mayor needs to get 3 people on board. This has recently happened in the city of Peterborough. It is the only challenge that I'm aware has proceeded by an application, and there's a court date. In that instance, Mayor Leal in the city of Peterborough sought to advance transitional housing and brought it forward, and by a vote of 4 to 7, that was more than 1/3 of the Council of 11, and that bylaw passed. And there has been a challenge brought forward. The head of council is entitled to vote on this, so that's why I say at the very bottom, 1/3 of council plus the mayor will give you the more than 1/3 vote. That's how that's the wording of the statute. By the way, I know I took some pains when I was talking about the administrative powers, how they can be delegated back to council. These powers that I've just shown you, the advancement of a matter or advancement of a bylaw for advancing provincial priorities, or the vetoing of a bylaw to stop the interference with provincial priorities, cannot be delegated by the mayor. Only the mayor and no one else can exercise these powers. Okay, now I'm going to switch and I'm going to go to the budget power or duty. It is now no longer council's budget. The head of council is now responsible for preparing a proposed budget and for putting it before council for adoption. The requirement is that the mayor does so on or before February the 1st of every year. Mayor can do so in advance of that. The head of council, if they don't propose the budget by February 1st, they essentially forfeit their right to do so, and the legislation says then the council shall prepare and propose the budget for adoption. There is no authority, just like there wasn't for the provincial priority powers, for the head of council to delegate the powers. However, the head of council can do this, and it's been done in a number of other municipalities. The head of council can give directions to municipal employees, predominantly the treasurer, but also the CAO and the clerk, to take certain actions to go forward with the budget, with the mayor's budget. And it could be as simple as a CAO, treasurer, and clerk, I want you to work together, and I want you to just proceed on the same basis as we've done at this municipality for years, create a budget committee, bring forward a public meeting to discuss this. And then at the very end, instead of it coming to council, I bring it to council, and council can decide to adopt it. Now, council can also decide to propose amendments. And if council proposes amendments, the head of council can veto the council's amendments. Council then has an ability to veto the mayor's veto, and again, it's done by a 2/3 vote. There are some complicated provisions as to how the rules function and what the timing is for all of this in the regulation, and I won't get into that. Okay, but now that's the mayor's budget, and it can be as simple as the mayor issuing direction to somebody, to staff, let's say the treasurer, bring me forward a budget, don't care how you get there, but I want to see a 0 tax increase or a -2% or a +2.5%. The mayor can do that, can do any array of different combinations and permutations to get the budget forward. Okay, and now, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn and just talk about some of the miscellaneous things at the end. I'm almost at the end here. As I've indicated before, there is a specific provision that speaks to delegation, right? The chief administrative officer authority can be delegated to council. Organizational structure to council or the CAO. Prescribed committees can be delegated to council, okay? All of these delegations are going to take place in accordance with the rules that are set out in the general delegation provisions in 23.1 sub 2 of the Municipal Act. For example, can a future mayor revoke the delegation that the current mayor puts in place? The answer is yes. Can the mayor himself revoke a delegation that he's delegated? The answer is yes, at any time, and so on. So there, you should pay attention to those rules in 23.1. Anyone who's curious about the delegation authority. There is an immunity provision. It's very interesting in how it's written. It borrows from two sections, sections 272 and 273 of the Municipal Act. And it says what I've put on the screen. Any decision that's made, or any veto power or other power that is exercised by the head of council, legally and in good faith under Part 6.1, shall not be quashed or open to review in whole or in part by any court because of the unreasonableness or supposed unreasonableness of the decision. So you can't really challenge the mayor's decisions, vetoes, directions for being unreasonable. However, it must be done legally and in good faith. Those are two challenges that someone can go to court on to an application to quash. If the mayor has acted illegally or in bad faith, then those are proper grounds on which to challenge a mayor's decision. It also says not open to review by a court. Someone said to me, but if the mayor passes, for example, a zoning bylaw with a minority of council, with more than 1/3 of council, would someone still be entitled to go and bring an appeal under the Planning Act? It's a zoning bylaw after all. And the answer is yes. It's unfortunate that they refer to this section as the immunity section, because anyone would think it's absolute immunity, but it isn't. So that can still be challenged because that still remains alive. The wording is not be quashed, which is an application quash, or open to review, a judicial review, by any court. So it leaves administrative tribunal appeals still alive. There is now no ability for council to appoint someone to be the head of council in a strong mayor municipality. The mayor of a strong mayor municipality can only be elected. Now, Mr. Mayor, you were acclaimed, I believe, in the most recent election, that qualifies, and if you read Section 37 of the Municipal Elections Act, you'll see that it says elected by acclamation. The fact that you were the strong mayor as of May 1st didn't really matter if you had been appointed or not. You would be vested in that. However, should there be a vacancy in your office, Mr. Mayor, either during this term or in any future term, the mayor can no longer be appointed by council under Section 263 of the Municipal Act. The municipality can only run a by-election. And concomitant with that, and if you look at the regulation, there's a provision in there. It is absolutely clear that the powers, in my view, and I know AMCTO has kind of waffled on this, my view, it's absolutely clear, and I've discussed this with the Toronto city solicitor, that the mayor, who's the strong mayor, is the only official, the only person who can exercise the strong mayor powers. An acting mayor, a deputy mayor, an interim mayor doesn't work. Only the mayor, who is the strong mayor, can exercise the powers. Can't be delegated, can't be somehow transferred by operation of law unless the person is voted in. So even though your procedure bylaw may say, hey, at a meeting of council, when the mayor's not there, the deputy mayor steps in and the deputy mayor has these authorities. Not the strong mayor powers. Those override the ability of the deputy mayor or someone acting as the interim or acting mayor to have those powers. All of the requirements must be in writing. To date, most of the mayoral decisions, directions, and vetoes have taken, don't take this the wrong way, look very much like executive orders. They fit that format. There's usually a short title. There's usually the reference to the statutory authority or the regulatory authority. There are perhaps a few whereas clauses, the recitals that give some context. And then there are lists, if there's more than one, of what the mayor is seeking to implement, what powers they're seeking to exercise. And then finally, there is one extra statutory change that's been made. As you know, under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, any member who is present at a meeting at which they have a matter that's to be considered and they have a pecuniary interest, whether direct, indirect, or deemed, that person must declare a pecuniary interest and then must recuse themselves from any participation in the decision-making process. Well, now, because some of these decisions will not be taking place at an open meeting of council or at any meeting of council, just think of the vetoing and the directions, the head of council has a mandatory obligation that as soon as they become aware that they have a pecuniary interest in a matter, they must file the written statement that is required under Section 5.1 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act with the clerk, stating the nature of the interest and the general nature of the pecuniary interest with the clerk. And that's filed in the registrar under Section 6.1. And finally, very clearly, shall not use the power or exercise the duty, or through the Hazel-McCallion Amendment, can't use their office to try to advance the recommendation or the decision of any officer or employee of the municipality. So, Mr. Mayor, I've come to the end. My very quick wrap-up conclusions. Strong mayor powers. There are limited executive powers and authorities, but my oh my, they're very, very significant. The administrative political powers, the powers related to legislative powers pertaining to provincial priorities. There is the budget power or slash duty or slash responsibility. And then there are those miscellaneous powers. So, Mr. Mayor, I thank you for the opportunity. I hope you don't think I went too long. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'd be pleased to seek to answer any questions that you or council may have.
Yeah, thank you, John. I know you've been making the rounds to lots of municipalities giving that presentation, and it's a good one, very, very detailed, and gives us a good primer on all of this. So I'll ask if there's questions or comments now from members of council. Councillor Grace and Councillor Mayette, and we'll keep going around.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, and thank you, John, for the really interesting, if alarming, information. A question just regarding the conflict of interest issue that you just raised. If the conflict of interest situation involves something that cannot be delegated by the mayor to anyone else, but it's an issue that is something that the municipality considers to be a very important priority, how does that end up getting moved along to fruition?
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Grace, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the mayor, let's go back to the example that I gave. There's a zoning bylaw, very important. The mayor would like to advance that. That's important. Maybe doesn't have the support of the rest of council. But if the mayor is bringing forward, let's say, rezoning bylaw on lands that may be right next door to his property, that may be a direct pecuniary interest. Maybe your integrity commissioner would be able to tell you that, right? The mayor would, let's presume the mayor decides, I have a pecuniary interest in that. He has to disclose that, and then he loses the authority to advance the bylaw and get a more than 1/3 vote to advance it. Council itself, though, can advance the bylaw in the normal course and continue to deal with it. All it means, Councillor Grace, is that the mayor can't exercise his authority under the power under 284.11.1 to advance it with just a minority of council supporting it.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that, Councillor Grace, because it goes to something I'm wondering about. Specific in the report that the clerk has prepared, John, there's a paragraph here that says subsection 284.41 of the Act requires that the mayor approve in writing all bylaws passed by council within 2 days. The purpose of this approval is to differentiate between bylaws which have received mayoral approval and those which have been vetoed, or those that are being considered to be vetoed. So my question pertaining to Councillor Grace's question is, what if, so that paragraph says the mayor must approve all bylaws passed by council. So our practice up to this point would be, if I'm not in the chair in a meeting, the deputy mayor's in the chair, or an alternate head of council, whoever's in the chair signs the bylaws that are passed that night. What this tells me is that no longer would be the case, that the mayor would be required to sign them within 2 days. What if the mayor has a pecuniary interest in one of those bylaws? The mayor has to sign the bylaws, but has a pecuniary interest in one of those bylaws, and nobody else can fulfill that function. What happens?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Mr. Mayor. Not one that I've been asked before, so I'll attempt to answer it this way. The reason why you have that particular provision in it, because there's now a limbo period, right? The mayor can exercise his authority to veto a bylaw by giving notice within 2 days. So that means the bylaws are kind of just sitting there in purgatory, not really able to be advanced. Many municipalities have taken the position, let's have some certainty, and right after the council meeting, the mayor issues a decision saying, I'm not going to veto any of these bylaws. Now, so that means that, okay, at least you have the mayor's commitment. Remember I said before, if the mayor does something, can always take it back, right? Anytime you do something, you could revoke that authority. But I think it gives more certainty to those bylaws. So you have a pecuniary interest in one of the bylaws that has been passed, right? So I don't see where the issue really arises. You would exclude yourself from approving that bylaw, but you would have had to excuse yourself from using your strong mayor powers with respect to that bylaw anyway. So it's not like you could have vetoed it. So the bylaw would essentially, by operation of law, have full force and effect. You couldn't deal with it because of the MCIA, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So that's how I see that working. I went through that really quickly. I hope you understood what I was saying.
I'm going to turn it back to Councillor Grace because it's her line of questioning, but I just so I'm clear though, so that paragraph there that says the mayor is required to approve in writing all bylaws isn't exactly accurate. Like if the mayor didn't approve the bylaws within 2 days, they would just come into force and effect anyway. Like there's no requirement that the mayor sign the bylaws. It just, if you don't and you wait 2 days, they come into force and effect, or you wait the 15 days, whatever it is, and don't veto it. If you just, no action allows them to come into force and effect, correct?
That's right. They come into force and effect 2 days later because you haven't done anything. That's right.
Okay, back to Councillor Grace. Sorry, Councillor Grace.
Thank you. My next question is about the time period for veto, and saying that that it must be a recent bylaw. What exactly is recent legally in this?
Yeah.
How many days?
Thank you, Councillor Grace. I'm sorry if I didn't explain this really clearly. So I use the word recent because when I used to say you can veto a bylaw, people would think, oh, I can go back and veto the noise bylaw from a year ago because I want to have construction occurring 24/7 in my municipality. What it says, if the mayor wants to exercise the right of veto, must give notice within 2 days of the vote of that bylaw. That's what I mean by it being recent. That means that you, first of all, in your municipality, the mayor could only veto bylaws after May the 1st because he didn't have the power to do so before that. If you have a meeting this evening and you pass bylaws this evening at the meeting, the mayor has 2 days to veto those bylaws. If those 2 days expire and he doesn't do anything, then those bylaws are full force or effect, and he can't come to the next meeting and say, oh, I forgot, I'm going to now veto those bylaws. He would have missed out on the timing. That's what I meant by recent.
This is not a question, but just a comment that one of the things that really bothers me about this, and ironically for a political party that traditionally rails against red tape, what's laid out in this report in terms of the repercussions upon our staff and the amount of work that now needs to be completed, updates to our policy, further research into our business plan. It's just, I don't like it. I guess I'll say that. Thank you.
Councilor Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thanks, John, for your presentation. Early on in your presentation, you said that you described the 4 different cohorts that were added to the strong mayor power. Started with Ottawa, Toronto, and then it expanded. Second cohort would be the $100,000 people population, and then the third cohort was, I think, 50,000. And then you said of the third cohort, you said those were the ones that needed to pledge to the provincial priorities in order to get the powers. And then the fourth cohort, of course, is the other 169 municipalities that have been added now. So is there only one cohort that has actually had to make a pledge to abide by and support the provincial priorities?
Yes, Councillor Mayette, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Only the third tranche that came forward, the 22 municipalities that had been offered the opportunity, were asked to make a pledge by the head of council to the provincial housing construction targets. The cities of Toronto and Ottawa were granted it. In fact, it was very clear Mayor Jim Watson in Ottawa didn't want it and ran away from it, disclaimed it as much as he could. Mayor John Tory, in fact, had been lobbying the provincial government to get stronger mayor powers. The second group just got them. There was no if, and, or buts. The third one was you can have them if you do this. And as I indicated, I think 22 were given the opportunity, but only 18 actually signed on onto the pledge. And then came the 170 afterwards, where it was very puzzling because I was asked this many times, and you may come and ask me this too, Councillor Mayette, is wasn't this proposed? It was proposed, and it was put on the ERO, the registry for commenting, and it was called proposed strong mayor powers to 169 municipalities. I think a lot of municipalities took the position, oh, well, if we pass a resolution and we show why we don't want it, it's unanimous, perhaps even with the mayor on board, maybe the province won't give it to us. And in fact, they did one better. They gave it to 170 municipalities on May the 1st. So it wasn't really a proposed grant at all. But yes, you're absolutely right. The third grouping was the grouping where they had to pledge to the provincial housing targets.
Just a follow up, and so that, I guess the 4 municipalities, the difference between 18 and 22, they've been had this shoved down on them as well then in the fourth cohort.
Yes, Councillor Mayette, I believe each of those 4 municipalities are now on the list. I'm not sure. The only one I know for sure is a municipality that I give advice to, is New Tecumseth. They could not sign on the first time because of water capacity issues, I think, and that's why they didn't come on, but they have been listed now. I believe Haldeman and Norfolk counties are also on there, and I believe they were excluded the second round, and there's a fourth one that escapes me right now.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have the deputy mayor next and then Councillor Stack.
Thank you, and through you, I think, well, I feel the same as Councillor Grace expressed. I have a question and also a question for our clerk. Are you, thank you for the presentation. Are you aware of any training or funding related to training that is going to flow down to municipalities? I don't doubt the intellectual capacity of our mayor. I think he's a pretty smart guy. However, some of this is requiring a different kind of way to be the mayor. You know, all of the requirements about writing stuff and the budget preparation. And of course, you know, our mayor doesn't have his own staff. So is there an expectation that there will be some specific guidance or funding or training that flows down that will be available to mayors in predominantly perhaps smaller rural municipalities that, you know, that capacity seems very different from the kind of people, the kind of skill set that a lot of the people who run for mayors has. Are you aware of any provincial guidance that's coming associated with training and funding?
Deputy Mayor, thank you for the question through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm not. And I've not heard one iota of any kind of resources being made available, except I think as the clerk earlier pointed out, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has been given some help. I think many municipalities have gone to other organizations, primarily AIM-CTO, who I think has been very helpful thus far. But no, Deputy Mayor, I've not heard of any kind of resources, funding, assistance, or even any kind of arbitration mediation for when the questions are, can the mayor actually do this? I think municipalities are being told, go ahead, you guys figure it out.
Thank you. My question related to what's in the report from the clerk. In the past, often when there's been, I guess, a complication or a process kind of thing that's occurring, we've had some flow charts prepared for us to guide us through decision making. When you talk about templates and formats and that sort of thing, because, you know, there's a third mentioned sometimes, 2/3, the next business day, 2 days, 14 days, 21 days. Can we expect to receive some flow chart type stuff that goes along with the formats or the templates, just to make sure everyone kind of sees what potential is there and what opportunities are there, both from the mayor's perspective, but for those of us on council? Is that going to be part of what you're preparing for us over the next period of time?
Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So as these are being prepared, there's going to be an opportunity to present them to council and of course, always receive feedback. And we want this to be as transparent for members of council and the public as possible. So receiving that feedback is, of course, a very important part of this. The municipal community is very tight-knit, and fortunately, we like to share. So a lot of other municipalities will have created some of those assets already. And through our networks, the CAO, the treasurer, and other staff, we're able to tap into those resources. In a couple of weeks, I'll be going to the AIM-CTO conference where Mr. Muscarin will be presenting. And at that time, there may be some resources and other people that I'll be able to connect in with who may have some of these presented or prepared already.
And just 2 comments. I understand that the province has an interest in their priorities associated with housing and infrastructure. I'm not entirely clear, though, on why, you know, this also includes opportunities associated with staffing and with organizational structure and with committees and that sort of thing. Because, you know, to me, those provincial priorities, I can see that with, you know, decisions through council. But I don't always have a sense that the connection is there with provincial priorities with the other two categories. I did want to, though, focus on and comment on the budget process. I find it interesting that, you know, that what's before us sets out that the mayor can create a budget. But then council can offer amendments, but the mayor can veto our amendments, but then we can veto the mayor's veto. It just seems like a very roundabout way to end up in a place that you've got something that is going to work for your community. But then even beyond that, it's referred to as the mayor's budget. But somewhere I read, and I think this was in the clerk's report, council's required to set the levy, set fees, and do something that's referred to as the tax ratio, which we don't hear a lot about here, but I know what it is. I think most of us do. But it's the mayor's budget, but yet council's doing all of this. So ultimately, you know, who's going to bear the brunt of, you know, the community liking or not liking something? Because it's a mayor's budget, but council is being asked or required to do the hard stuff, which is set the levy and all this other kind of business. So I just find it unfortunate. My last comment, though, is that there's something in here, and I think this is maybe a question for John. The clerk references all of this applies, and the strong mayor situation goes right up to the end of the term. It doesn't have any connection to the election period or that sort of thing. And we're about a year out from, you know, people indicating an interest in running for the next election. However, there's some reference in there to the lame duck thing. How does that fit into this? So if we become we find ourselves in a lame duck situation in terms of council, but you've got this strong mayor situation, how does the veto 1/3, 2/3 council thing, how does that all work together towards the end of a term of council? I don't know if you have an answer to that, but it just strikes me as something that's not defined very well. Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, back to the deputy mayor. That's a really fascinating question that you've put there. I've usually been asked the question in this way: do the lame duck provisions apply to the strong mayors? And my answer is no, because the lame duck provisions just talk about the council of a local municipality. But you've raised something, Deputy Mayor, that's interesting. Even if the mayor wanted to advance a bylaw and it's a lame duck council, he might only need a third. But if the lame duck council is lame duck, then you can't advance it. The mayor may still be able to veto things, and I think that's one of the oversights that the province has left in there that I think might get cured by an amendment, because right now the mayor can still take some actions. For instance, dismiss a statutory officer, or do certain things about division heads. Sorry, not a statutory officer, which is one of the provisions in the lame duck restrictions that a local council can't do. So I think some of these things will have to be worked out. And as I keep saying to many municipalities, I don't have a lot of the answers right now. I probably have more questions than I have answers, because quite honestly, this seems like it was put together relatively quickly. It hasn't changed one bit since they were first announced back in 2023. All that's been changed is how many municipalities were added to the list. But the powers have remained exactly the same. You would have thought that someone would have thought about maybe doing something about it and clarifying some of these issues, but they haven't.
Counselor Stack.
Thanks. Just a couple of clarifications. So when it comes to the veto, there's sort of two timelines that seem to run concurrently. So the mayor can provide a notice to consider vetoing, and then that starts the 14-day clock. And from what I can see from the report, so mayor gives the notice on Monday, clerk has to tell us on Tuesday, and the 14-day clock and the 21-day clock for us to consider, do they run concurrently? So really, so there it's 14 days, then 21 days? Do you see, like, so it says here, the mayor has 14 days, so the notice of intention to consider vetoing a bylaw opens a 14-day window within which the mayor may either approve the bylaw in writing or proceed to veto it. So just so I'm clear, does the mayor, that 14-day clock start the same day that the clerk's notice is issued, which looks like starts our 21-day notice period?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't read it like that, Councillor Stack. I read it like this. The mayor has 2 days from the vote to say, I'm going to veto it, or I'm thinking about vetoing it. Then he has 14 days from the date of the original vote. It doesn't start with when he tells you that he's going to veto it. The 14 days runs from the date of the original vote. So if he waits 2 days, he only has 12 more days to pass the veto. Okay. Then when the clerk issues the veto notice to council, that's when the 21 days starts to run. So let's say the mayor takes 2 days to issue the notice, then exercises the veto right on the 14th day. Then the clerk takes another day to get you the notice. Then you have 21 days from, I guess, 15 days from the original vote, if my math is correct.
So, okay, so the 21 days start, so the clerk will give us notice after the mayor decides whether she or he wishes to veto the bill or
That's
veto
right.
the bylaw. Okay. So my second question is, so in that 21-day period, it's not clear from here, and I'll just be honest, I didn't read through the entire legislation because frankly, I find this an abuse of power at best. It's gross. And I think the government, if this had been any other government, if a liberal government had put this in, the conservative opposition would have lost their minds. And I find this frankly incredibly undemocratic. People did not vote in a strong mayor. So to suggest that all of a sudden, 3/4 of the way through an election cycle, you're giving a mayor strong mayor powers is frankly unbelievable, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. So in that 21-day period, does that mean we have to do it through a council meeting, or can that be done by a written veto? Do we have a clear sense on what's required in order for the council to elect whether or not they want to veto the veto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Stack, my view is that it has to be done at a meeting. And I've been asked the question, there's only 21 days there. What happens if it's during a holiday period or some sort of emergency or something? It's 21 days. That's what it says. So you have to have a meeting at which to have the vote, the 2/3 vote. So, yeah.
And this is more just for emphasis purposes. So it has to be a 2/3 supermajority of all members of council. So if the only reason we don't get that 2/3 majority is because someone's unable to attend, the mayor is able to veto. So theoretically, they could be, there's an element of strategy there should someone be sort of absent or they know that someone's going to be absent. So that's interesting. I had a question on the judicial review, the exemption from judicial review. Is that, like, I realize the municipal governments exist at the behest of the provincial government. Is that have you seen that provision, a similar provision before? I'm not familiar with the legislated exemption from judicial review. I understand the administrative, so like the land tribunal can still look at a decision if the public objects to a decision made by the mayor through a super mayor bylaw. But is that sort of exemption something you've seen before? I'm just admittedly ignorant on that subject.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Stack. Yes, I have seen it. You've seen it in a lot of, you've seen it in this conservative government's various statutes. They have put in, you cannot go and challenge us or any decisions made by the Crown or other entities. But to be fair, there is a history of similar type of immunity provisions in statutes of all colors, not just municipal, but like for universities and other entities as well.
Okay. So the last thing I think I just wanted to confirm. So when the veto comes into place, it's the opinion of the mayor. So there's no reasonableness test or anything. It's just the mayor. And again, I don't mean our mayor, just any mayor who aligns to the Conservative Party's agenda for the province could say, I'm of the opinion that this bylaw does not align with provincial priorities. Like, is there a standard we're working with, or just like an opinion is just, again, a pretty broad power without sort of a reason. It's reasonable and standard at law in the legal world to have a reasonableness standard. So does one exist in the law that maybe we just didn't reference, or is it really just of the opinion of the mayor?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Stack, I think those words were chosen on purpose. When you say it's of someone's opinion, it leaves an element of discretion there. You'll see this probably in the Municipal Act right now. Integrity commissioners, for instance, it's the integrity commissioner's opinion. So it leaves a certain degree of discretion. I think that was intended. The mayor must provide some supporting reasons for it, for the veto, as well as for advancing a provincial priority bylaw. So the mayor must provide some reasons. What does those reasons have to say? Well, I think they have to at least say, I'm advancing it because it's advancing the provincial priority for these reasons. Otherwise, if you don't have anything, I think then it becomes illegal. You haven't fulfilled the requirements. What the standard or threshold is, I don't know. And as I said, there's been no, actually, I'm not sure I said this. There's been no challenges of which I'm aware of, which means that there's been no jurisprudence over the last 2 years at all created. So we don't know what we're dealing with. Can I, if you don't mind, I'll just spend one more minute of your time. My view is I think the powers will be dealt with and interpreted broadly, because the Municipal Act Section 8 says you're supposed to interpret all powers under the Act broadly to give effect to what they were intended to propose. So if a mayor says, I'm of the opinion this potentially advances this provincial priority, I think that's going to be read broadly, and I think it's going to be difficult to challenge.
Right, made more difficult by the fact that, like, without a standard of which the mayor can operate his or her opinion that a bylaw should be overridden because it doesn't comply with the province's policy expectations, there's really no recourse for council other than this 2/3 veto, which also depends on everyone being present at the time the veto is run through council. Just so I'm clear. So I just want to make it clear to the 15 people watching that what we're saying is, like, yes, it's of the opinion, and yes, she or he, being the mayor, has to provide some rationale for their veto decision, but really there's no basis upon which anyone can really challenge it. Once the decision's made, if there isn't a 2/3 majority to veto the mayor's veto, it's a bylaw. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I've been asked this question, can council challenge the mayor's authority? And the answer is yes. Council can, by a simple majority, say, we don't agree with you. We're going to seek to challenge it. We don't think you've exercised your authority in the proper way. You've acted illegally. You may have acted in bad faith. I think what I was trying to say to you, Councillor Stack, though, I think that's going to be a hard or tough hill to climb, because I think of the way the language is very loose and, as I said, flexible or elastic, and I think it's going to be hard to challenge those. But yes, a council could say, you know what, we're going to retain our own lawyer where we're going to fight the mayor on this, and you know the public's going to love that, to see a council fighting its own mayor.
Okay, but I mean, I'm not asking for your opinion perhaps on this point, but maybe I'll just say, like, from a practical perspective, once the mayor decides to veto something, there can be fairly flimsy logic, but barring the rest of council making a decision, a simple majority of council making a decision to challenge that decision and going through the judicial process, the decision is made, and we've effectively stripped council of its ability to vote on matters related to provincial priorities because of this legislation. So you don't need to respond to that. That's just now my opinion on the matter. So maybe I'll just close by saying, like, I think my opinion's pretty clear, as it usually is with this government, but I think people should be very frustrated at this decision. We were all elected on a one vote principle. So to see this type of legislation move forward, and I think recognizing Mayor Charbonneau has said he's not going to execute these powers. There are other municipalities in which that may not be the case. And I think we should all be concerned when a government does not run on a principle and then makes fairly anti-democratic legislative change. And then just also has the same set of powers, since he said, I think the law has been in place since 2023, and can't get its act together to clean up the holes and then implements it more broadly. I think that speaks to some of the challenges and some of the concerns we should be about this government's ability to put policy in place that's rational and well thought out, because they've had this for nearly 2 years and they managed to still leave pretty big gaps in their legislative regime while they implement it really broadly. So I think that's just, the government should be ashamed of this legislation. And once again, we're now stuck to deal with the consequences of their, poor policy making.
Thank you. I'm going to get Councillor Davinsky next, and then I'm going to come around to those who haven't spoken. Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and through you to John. John, thank you for your presentation. It was excellent. If you read what the clerk had given us, you gave us in bullet form, and that was very good. And having said that, can we meaning council, or at least me anyway, can we get a copy of this presentation for us to review and look at and study?
Thank you, Councillor Davinsky. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've indicated to your clerk I'd be pleased that if she provides you with a copy. For your eyes only, if you don't mind. I try to protect my proprietary information, and I wouldn't want someone else to do something like put their own name on the front and use it themselves. But I don't mind council members and staff having it.
Trust me, if I put my name on front of this, people would know immediately that it wasn't me. Anyway, the mayor, our mayor, has wisely opted out of this. He's on record as opting out and not taking advantage of these strong mayor powers. Can that, I don't know if it could happen here, probably, but could it happen anywhere else? In and out, opt in for a possibility and then opt out. But is that etched in stone once you say one or the other?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Davinsky, the answer is no, it's not etched in stone. And in fact, one of the rules that I referred to, Councillor Davinsky, before about the delegation, the person who gives up the delegation always retains it. So while they can give it up, they can take it back at any time. So yes, there could be an opt-in and opt-out. So here's the example that I gave. Your mayor today may be very comfortable with the council that he has, and maybe trusting and feel that he has loyalties and so on. And he could say, I am giving this council the authority back to prescribe committees, to the organizational structure, to the CAO. I'm good with this. What happens if there's a sea change next time? The mayor may not feel very comfortable with a new council, may not have the same willingness to abide by what that council may want to do, and may want to take it back. So that can happen at any time. So yes, to use your words, there can be an opt-in and opt-out, and opting in and opting out. Yes.
Can the same mayor do that several times during a mayor's,
Yes.
okay, thank you for that. A comment, I get the feeling that this sort of thing, if it came into play and we had that, I can see councils fighting with each other, council members fighting with each other to the point where council gets nothing done. And it becomes a mayor's game. And I don't think there are too many mayors that would want that. This also feels to me like what's good for Toronto with strong powers will be good for the rest of the province. This isn't the first time this happened, and this is going to happen again. Also, with all the challenges you have mentioned and that Councillor Stack has alluded to, it looks like in a budget session, we would have to have a new line in there for this sort of thing, because it's going to cost municipalities a fortune to challenge some of this material if it goes to court. And that would be a shame. Rob Flack, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, was at the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities Conference in Collingwood a couple of weeks ago. He had 10 minutes to speak, and not once did he mention this particular program, even though it was in effect that day as he spoke to us. And the Vice Deputy Mayor can allude to that as well. He never mentioned it. There was no time for questions. And it was that issue that I feel this issue could turn the councils into. And that to me is very scary. We have to protect our democracy. Grassroots democracy is where the municipal the governments stand. And it's like that's being taken away too. I hope not. Mr. Mascara, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to get the Vice Deputy Mayor, then Helpin, then Duhaime, and then if there's others, I'll come back to you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess the question I have is, is this really going to change anything in terms of how you run the mayor's seat and how you govern this municipality? And I'm anxious to hear your comments in a few minutes. How much is really going to change? And I think we really have to keep this in perspective. I really do. There's a whole lot of common sense. Our mayor and this council has to, it just has to be a whole lot of common sense. I was at the OSUM conference with John, you're right, Councillor Dubinsky, and Mr. Flack, he spoke for 10 minutes, did not mention it. He did not allow time for questions. And the 250 delegates were primed. They were primed to stand, get up to that microphone, but they didn't allow it. And, it's really, I find it pretty ironic that, Premier Ford spoke via teleconference, and he mentioned strong mayor powers, and the 250 delegates was around the booze. There was a whole lot of booing. I mean, the 250 municipalities from small urban municipalities basically sent a message. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? We're not in favor of this. And John, you and I, we spoke to a lot of delegates at that conference. Wasn't a whole ton of support in that room for strong mayor's powers. So I think we have to keep this in perspective. And we've got a mayor that, this council has been pretty, in my view, has been very functional. I think we've done give ourselves a pat in the back. I think we've done a commendable job over the last 2, 4, 8, 10 years, 12 years. And I think at the end of the day, the common sense will prevail. And you're right, Councillor Davinsky, who wants to get into court battles and costing the municipality a fortune, the staff time this could take if we really, if this was fully implemented. It's just such a wrong thing to happen. And I think common sense is going to prevail.
Thank you, Halpin, and then Duhame.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. This is just more of a comment, but I think this is a good example of the government fixing something that wasn't broken. And as you said, what's good for Toronto is good for us, and also putting a lot of effort on something that no one was really asking for. And so this is kind of question be directed to John, if I could. Like, the Premier has been known to act and then think, and then sometimes he changes his mind. Is there any indication that he is open to any feedback or anything on this, or this is just pretty much a done deal?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Halpin. My own view is that I think it's a done deal. I don't understand, Councillor Halpin, why there was a release on April the 9th that said this is out there for comments, albeit only 1 week. And so many municipalities had special council meetings and tripped over themselves to try to get a resolution to get back to, you know, show we're really against this. We really don't want it. And look, the mayor even agrees. And the province just, you know, it seemed like they didn't look at it. My own view is that I can almost see that every municipality in the province will be granted this strong mayor powers for the next term of council next time. I think that's where it's going with this government. I don't say that because I know anything special, but that's the feeling that I get. It's like there's this avalanche coming down. It's just gathering more and more force. And it looks like, I mean, almost half the municipalities, one of my clerks said, John, there's 49.2 municipalities now that have strong mayor powers. That's, you know, why not give the other 220 whatever, you know, the powers so to make everybody equal. That's where I see it going, Councillor Halpin, but that's me speculating.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Duhame.
Yeah, thanks. And through you, Mayor, just a question and a comment. Question for John. Upper tier municipalities, are they potentially getting strong mayor powers anytime soon too? I know this covers lower tier, but a lot of the, you know, working in development and planning would include the upper tier municipalities as well. Any thoughts on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Duhame, my sense is I think there was a clear message sent by the province when only single tier and up and lower tier municipalities were granted the powers. You'll know that many regional governments have had their planning authorities clawed back. Now, I know that that's just planning. There's infrastructure, there's public works, there's other things. My sense is it doesn't look like it's going to go to regional, county, and district governments anytime soon, probably because maybe the province is rethinking about, especially regional governments. So I think it was really telling that no wardens or chairs were given the strong mayor powers.
Okay, thanks, John. And just a comment, in terms of the provincial priorities, I think this council has done a pretty good job of advancing building units in the town. So that's all I'll have. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll go back to folks who've already spoken to Councillor Grace. Did you? No? So we'll go to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And through you, the Vice Deputy Mayor made a number of good points. He did ask a question though at the beginning about you taking the floor for a few minutes, Mr. Mayor, to say some things. I guess I just wanted to understand The report that we have before us tonight, we're being asked to receive it for information. I believe the way that the legislation is all laid out, we have nothing to say about your decision in terms of how you decide to use it. So this report has a number of very specific comments about, I believe, even though it's written by the clerk, it's picking up on your perspective and your intentions. I guess I would appreciate, like the Vice Deputy Mayor suggested, if you took the floor or we have the floor, but if you took a few minutes to make some comments about your own perspective based on what's in this report. But I would respectfully ask, should you change your mind sometime over the next year and a half, that, and I know you will, but that you provide that information to the community and to council, because I appreciate very much that you've put it on out right now. And I think many members of the community really respected that we were quick, you were quick, and we were quick to support it right out of the gate. It got a fairly decent positive reaction from the community. And now you're saying in this report, what you really intend to do. I would just, again, respectfully ask that if you change your mind, you just, do the same thing again. But I would very much like to hear from you about your perspective based on everything you've heard tonight and the excellent presentation we've had, and what your intentions are, so that it's part of the record. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I will speak to it. I hate these powers. I think that I think it's insidious. It's an insidious thing because it will erode the relationship between council and the mayor, no matter what, right? Like you can hear it, even in your comments, Deputy Mayor, right? Like, because I'm a human being, right? He could change his mind, right? And he could do this, he could do that. And then, all that I'm almost 20 years in elected office. In all those years, the thing that we have been trained over and over again, the fundamental, the core thing is that all members of council are equal, right? Each exercising a vote. The mayor is the leader of council, the leader among equals. I think that John put it well in his presentation, right? That's how it's framed, plays a spokesman role and a leadership role, and offers council advice about its role and its function, but doesn't have any power to direct or to do anything or to supersede council in any way. So this just upends that and places the mayor separate from council, apart from council. In many cases, attempts to place the mayor above council. And it's because it comes from, I think it comes from a place of a dislike for councils, right? That's, if you listen to John's presentation and you see where it came from, it's because there's a bent there of being against councils and in favor of an American system. And, and you look at American style system, you look at that budget power, that's how the president of the United States introduces a budget, right? The president of the United States drafts the budget, introduces it to Congress, Congress discusses it, can propose changes to it, and the president can veto their changes or veto the bill. And we all see how well Congress works in the United States, right? It's a super effective form of government, right? So it's the collaboration that works well. At least it's worked well in the town of Saugeen Shores. I'm not sure it works well everywhere, but probably you're better off to try to force and encourage collaboration rather than to say, well, collaboration will never work and we're just going to create a bunch of strong women and men who are going to deliver edicts and orders and this is how it'll be. But the problem with it is that now it's in place, it separates the mayor from council, gives the mayor these powers, and will be insidious in terms of that relationship. I feel certain it will erode the relationship between mayors and their councils, even in the town of Saugeen Shores, which is a shame. It's a tragedy, really, because we've had such good working relationships, not speaking only of myself, but every one of my predecessors that I know, always. So it's just a tragedy. So, but there's nothing we can do, I guess. We haven't even got a letter back from the minister responding to our letter to him, apart from the one that told us we were getting the powers. So I'm pretty sure we're stuck with this. So the question is, what are we going to do? You've seen there, short term, you're right, Deputy Mayor, those do come from me. I intend to issue decisions to delegate the authority to appoint the chief administrative officer to council, to delegate the management of the town's organizational structure and employment matters to the chief administrative officer, and to delegate authorities to establish, determine functions and appoint chairs and vice chairs of committees to council, which will be exercised. And all of those powers will be exercised in the same way that they've always been exercised in the past. So I will delegate all the powers that I can delegate. I think the budget is a different question because of this February 1st date. I don't feel like the municipality can wait until February 1st where my authority would lapse to start a budget process. So I feel like I'm going to have to direct staff to craft a budget to deliver to me that I will deliver to you. I think that's the only way to operate the municipality. So I think I'll probably have to do that. I will say all directions that my intention is that all directions that I give, I will treat in a manner similar to the way site plan approvals are treated now, where I will have them prepared in draft form. I will table them before council in draft, where you will have an opportunity then to provide comment to the decision, to the directions before I sign them. So if there are concerns, you can express them, and I will take your comments obviously into consideration. And that'll be the same. So these ones here, as well as the budget one, whatever other ones have to be issued, I'll table them in draft form before they're issued formally. So we can continue to consult on these matters. Anyway, I guess overall, I don't know all the implications at this point, but overall, I guess I would say my intent is to attempt to retain council's authority to direct the municipality in as whole and complete a form as I can, recognizing that there are areas where I will not be able to do that because I can't delegate these authorities. And at least in the case of the budget, I feel I have to exercise it in the interest of the municipality. So, so that's where I'm at as of right now. It's an evolving discussion, and I guess my final comment is I'm open to council's input, comments, direction, criticism, or whatever else is you have, whatever other comments you have. I will seek to take your advice and direction in all respects going forward. So, yeah, the deputy mayor.
I just wanted to say, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all council, but I hope there's a general consensus on this, that I just want to indicate to you that your willingness to appreciate the role that all of us play in the good of the community and to continue to maintain that balance is very appreciated. So I hope that that's reflected by everybody. And on a personal note, I've watched you personally from the moment you got elected, sort of grow in your role as a municipal councillor. And I really do appreciate you verbalizing your impression of what it means to be on council, because I think you did personify it as a ward councillor, as the deputy mayor, and then as the mayor. And I would be very surprised if you changed your direction at this point. So I have confidence in that, and I hope, and I think everybody else here does too, because we have watched you for a very long time do council in a very meaningful way, but very appreciative of you verbalizing that we all play an important part in this too. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Are there further questions or comments from members? All right. Seeing none, there is a recommendation the council receive the Strong Mayor Powers Implementation Report for information. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by the deputy mayor, second by Councillor Davinsky. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, John. We really appreciate your time as always.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to present this evening. I wish you all the best going forward, and I'll just put in a plug. If you need any help, I'm here. So thank you again for the opportunity. Good
Very
evening.
good. Thank you. Have a good night. Okay, so we're on to 7.2, which is the Cultural Heritage Master Plan Final Draft and Implementation, and we'll turn that over to the manager, Planning and Development Services.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll just make my remarks brief, but I want to note that Denise Horn, our consultant with NPG Planning Solutions, is also online, and she'll turn her camera on when so directed to help answer questions. I want to highlight that when we held this, the draft or presented the draft of the Cultural Heritage Master Plan in January, we got a number of comments and charged with going away and further consulting with the community. So what this report does is outline what we heard at the council meeting and outlines how we have changed or not changed the plan. And notably, I just want to highlight that there are two elements that we're not recommending change to. The first is item 2, where concerns about property prioritization. There was a concern identified that we heard at council that prioritizing the designation is not appropriate, and the plan indicates the process is time sensitive and time consuming, and we do need to make these, we think that is a recommendation that should stand. And secondly, it's the last one on the bottom of the page, concerns about identifying property whose owners object, is we've proffered no change in the report. We recommend that a policy should be approved that does not exclude properties from registration. If the owners object, it should be the policy that properties might be designated subject to council approval. We did circulate, we got comments from the community about this plan should be inclusive of the arts. I'm just making note that the town has a public art policy and is also considering through the destination development plan how art can play a vital role in community life. And I guess they'll leave the report there because I know there might be some questions. And as I mentioned, Denise is online to help answer those as well.
Thank you. So there is a resolution, the council adopt the Cultural Heritage Master Plan. Is there mover and seconder? Moved by Gray, seconded by Stack. Questions or comments from members? And we'll start with the deputy mayor and then Councillor Halpern.
Thank you, and through you, I'm grateful that we finally have a plan before us. I'm still extremely disappointed, though, that the reason why we even started this process was to provide a way to get investment, particularly in the Southampton Town Hall. That was where this all started from, because we had a study done, we had a report, community group, our community committee was there, and we were stopped from anything proceeding because there was no plan. And unfortunately, I don't see this plan as taking us any closer to significant investment in the Southampton Town Hall than we were, fully, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I do want to ask, though, this report, I appreciate at the end, there's some costing of things. So this idea about paying for designation updates. And I think it's important that there be a distinction made between registration and designation. So we need to be careful with using those two terms to mean the same thing. Registration to me is about being included on a heritage registry. Designation is a total different process. So we have a number of designated properties. It indicates on the chart that it's about an $800 expenditure to do updates on the designations that exist. A number of those are municipal properties, so that, kind of goes without saying, but the ones that are private residences, is the expectation then that taxpayers will have to pay to upgrade or update existing designations. And then there's also something about $8,000 to $10,000 to do something. And again, is the expectation that taxpayers will have to cover the cost to deal with designation situations that reflect private property situations? Is that what this is saying?
Yes, Mayor, I'll offer my own thought, but then defer to Denise if she's got some, or Ms. Horn, if she's got some additional comment about her experience in other communities. But certainly the idea here was there was an expectation that this would cost money. It's that, it does how the town goes about paying for it is another discussion entirely, and it's not part of what I intended. But for edification, perhaps Ms. Horn can show her experience.
Through the mayor, thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. So with respect to your question there, that was in relation to, just want to confirm that we're on the same page here. Objective 2, improving process. Number 6, processes for, no, sorry, excuse me. Number 5, processing heritage property designations under Part 4. Municipal, third party, and owner initiated. Was that the question? Sorry, can I?
I just don't have the plan up in front of me to have the number. It's because
Okay.
there's requirements to update things or do things, is the expectation that the ones that already exist, that taxpayers would be on the hook to update those.
For the Part 4 designations, you're asking. So for the Part 4, for the existing designated heritage properties, to update the existing designation bylaws, no, that would not be what we're proposing here. We were simply asked to outline the potential costs if an outside or external consultant was requested to prepare that information. So another option is that staff and the Municipal Heritage Committee could work together with the property owner to update the existing designation bylaws.
Okay, Councillor Halpin then next.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Yeah, that was my question too, because for updating designated bylaws for properties already designated under section 33, 4 to 6,000 per property times 16 properties, that'd be 64 to 96,000. But you're saying that won't really be, I just want to fully understand that.
Through the mayor, that's a ballpark for each individual property when the designation bylaw does not provide any background as to this, or does not provide the statement of cultural heritage value or interest or the heritage attributes. So what that means is that in order to demonstrate and substantiate what the cultural heritage value of the property is, additional research and analysis needs to be undertaken. So essentially a full 906 evaluation, right? So 906 being the prescribed criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. So that's where those costs would come from. There is a process under the Ontario Heritage Act now to amend designation bylaws. It's sort of a similar process to essentially a new designation. But there's an opportunity there for, as I mentioned, Municipal Heritage Committee and staff to work with property owners to update designation bylaws. And there is an opportunity for property owners to object, right? So there is a special process for what they would refer to as substantial amendments to designation bylaws.
Okay, thank you. And so, I mean, under the good leadership of Councillor Grace, there was 2 or 3 properties brought into the registry. And I mean, when they were brought in, all the information was there. I don't see why, So what you're saying is if we didn't do this, if we just hired staff or something, is that what you're saying? Or we hired an outside person to do these, that's what it costs? As
So through the mayor,
opposed to the way
likely-
we've done it.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there, councillor. So yes, through the mayor. So the most recent designation bylaws, I understand, have very detailed planning analysis and reports to support them. It's likely the designation bylaws that were undertaken in the 1970s, 1980s, for which it would be more difficult to show the research and analysis that was undertaken in order to designate those properties. those are likely to be the situations where a more thorough and detailed evaluation would need to be undertaken. So that's what those costs refer to. A typical cultural heritage evaluation report for a property these days can range anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 or more. So the range that we've sort of provided here is sort of an estimation, assuming that there hopefully is already some research on file with the town to substantiate those early designations, but sometimes it can be hard to track down that information. Sometimes the information hasn't been saved, and it's not easily accessible. So a heritage consultant has, an ethical obligation to do a detailed analysis to substantiate and demonstrate how a property meets the 906 criteria and what the heritage value is. So that's what those costs are associated with.
Okay, thank you. And just if I add up all the high estimates on this plan, it comes to $344,800. And so currently there's no money budgeted for any of this right now. Would that be correct?
Manager?
Yes, that's correct. There's nothing in the long-range business plan to cover a lot of these costs. But as it was mentioned by Ms. Horn, a lot of these costs are if we do an outside consultant. And so there is an in-house, capacity building exercise we want to undertake. That's one element. Number two is we would present to council as appropriate, perhaps in the budget process for the plan on implementing it. So I should have added that probably to the report about saying that, for example, it's pick one without any cost, but you can apply the same principle to one with costs. If we were to prioritize properties for designation from the Heritage Registered, we'd say that's town staff's responsibility. We'd be reporting to town, and if there is a cost to that, that would come with the report, and whether that's part of the business plan or individual reports, that was the expectation.
Thank you. I'll just quickly, it said on page 72, restriction on demolition. What is the purpose of this notice? Is it to save the building or just to give council a chance to talk, or what is the purpose of that? Thank you.
Go to Denise.
Sure, through the mayor. So that is legislation that is quoted from the Ontario Heritage Act. And it's specifically in relation to a notice of intent to demolish for a listed property under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So one of the things that municipalities have found is that they don't have established processes for how to handle a notice of intent to demolish. And so it is very unclear when the 60-day timeline for notice has been provided, when that 60 days starts, right? So essentially the process under Section 27 to demolish a listed property is that a property owner must submit notice in writing to council of their intent to demolish. But municipalities have sort of been very confused as to whether that might mean, does it mean councils that when notice is submitted to the chief building official, when a demolition permit is submitted, or does it need to be a formal letter to council? Does it need to be an email? So in essence, that section is just setting out what the policy basis is in the Ontario Heritage Act, and this section is advising that it would be worthwhile for council to develop a formal written process for how to manage notices of intent to demolish under Section 27.
Okay, thank you. And just one last thing. I like the idea here that it says that on page 62, Section 27, listing individual properties that could you do that to do like a neighborhood or a street? I'm just going to use, for example, High Street. Not that I'm saying that we would do that, but could you just say under this, we designate this street between these blocks as a heritage zone? Is that what that refers to? Thank you.
Yes, through the mayor, yes. So that there is the opportunity, you're referring there to the heritage character areas and the neighborhood policy areas. Yes, so what that does is it essentially, there are a few references in the town official plan to the character of an area, but nowhere is that character defined. In some instances, the urban design guidelines that the town has prepared speak to character, right? But there is the opportunity, and many municipalities have done this, whereby they have adopted official plan policies that recognize a certain area as having a specific character, so that when applications are submitted under the Planning Act for official plan amendment or zoning bylaw amendment, there is an ability for a certain area, whether it's a street, whether it's a neighborhood or larger, to be identified as containing a certain character that is to be conserved, respected, enhanced. It sort of provides an ability to measure what compatibility looks like in an area for, a new development proposal.
Thanks very much.
Okay, Councillor Grace, and then the Vice Deputy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Denise and Jay, everybody involved in this. I also had questions about the individual cost for updating these designating bylaws. And I'm glad to hear you say that, and to hear Jay say that we're going to try and look and see how we might be able to use the talents and energy of our Municipal Heritage Committee. We also, thanks to council's support, are going to be having a summer intern to help out the Municipal Heritage Committee, whether that's through a grant or whether that's funded by the municipality. That is something that I could foresee that person helping. And I also want to recognize Sheila Latham, our award winner from 2024, Municipal Heritage Award winner, who did incredible work putting together the designation applications for the most recent entrance onto our designation bylaw list. And also her generosity in preparing and providing the template that I think that you've used a little bit in the draft template that we have in the appendix for this report. So all of that will help. I know that I think that our current Heritage Committee, we've got a lot of experienced, talented people who are willing to do some research to help out on that. Just a couple of comments that I wanted to make on this. I appreciate, I know that the many changes to heritage legislation that have occurred in the last couple of years have been tumultuous, have had negative effects upon our heritage resources, or at least the potential to be negative. And the fact that the report says that additional changes are anticipated. I appreciate the recommendations in the report for developing policy to guide staff in dealing with these heritage-related applications. It's the same as the strong mayor thing. All of this legislation is just the amount of work that's piled on our staff to deal with this is distressing. And I appreciate all the work that staff has done on that. I'm glad to see the the recommendation about the Ontario Urban Forest Council Heritage Tree Program. We have talked about that. Deputy Mayor has talked about that for a long time, and it's been discussed not only with the Heritage Committee, but also the environmental committees have talked about that as well. And hopefully this is something that we can really seriously pursue. I am glad to see the recommendation about working with rural community members to identify cultural heritage resources that are important in these communities. And that's something that, well, one of our new interpretive plaques is for Sparks Corner, which is right smack in the middle of between Port Elgin and Southampton, and has a lot of reference to the rich history of that particular area. And the last thing I wanted to say is about the, I'm glad the report mentioned GC Houston's proactive leadership, GC Houston Schools' proactive leadership in celebrating cultural heritage. And I just, one of the things that you mentioned was lighting up Fairy Lake during the winter. That's gone away the last couple of years because of logistical problems. And I'm hoping that staff may see how we might strike up a conversation with the school community to see if they're still interested in doing that and what we can facilitate, how we may be able to facilitate that. Thank you.
The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as the old saying goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And there's a couple good comments in the report, many good comments in the report. Denise said strong foundations. This report provides for a strong foundation for cultural heritage planning. I like that, and it's so true. And you also go on to say this report provides for a preliminary framework for enhancing municipal conservation actions. And I think that's also true. So I think this report was long overdue, and we now have it as a planning document, and I think it's something we'll put to good use. Councillor Grace mentioned about provincial legislation, recent significant changes to the heritage legislation policy at the provincial level. Denise, that there was one line in the report, and I'm not sure what page it's on, but about the heritage registry. Did I read it correctly when I think it said that the properties included on the heritage registry had to be removed by 2027 and cannot be replaced, put back into the registry for a period of 5 years? Could you comment on, is that a fact?
Yes, through the mayor. Yes, so one of the changes through the bills was that any property that was listed as of January 1st, 2023 will be removed from the Heritage Register by January 1st, 2027. Any properties listed after that date will be removed by their second anniversary if they have not been designated. And there's a 5-year moratorium after a property is removed from the Heritage Register to relist. However, properties can be designated even if they have been removed from the Heritage Register. So there's some comfort there.
Yeah. I was mentioning earlier, I attended the OSM conference, Ontario Small Urban Municipalities Conference in Collingwood 2 weeks ago with Councillor Davinsky. Went on the downtown walking tour, and I don't know how familiar you are with down in Collingwood, but they were the first municipality in the province of Ontario to have Heritage District designated back in the 1990s, and over 200 properties as part of the Heritage Conservation District. So I think that's commendable. And I saw in your report on page 7, I think it was, under recommendations that for Heritage Conservation District study, that could range from $30,000 to $200,000. And to talk about that range, that's a big range. And I see what Collingwood did. That's 200 property. That's a lot of properties to look at. I imagine they would have cost them $200,000 or more to do that report. Maybe not in the 1990s, but certainly today. So just talk about that range from 30,000 to 200,000 for Heritage Conservation District study.
Yes, through the mayor to you, Vice Deputy Mayor. So It's difficult to provide a quote for heritage conservation districts because it's very much dependent on how large the area is that is to be studied. And that is because we spoke about the recent changes to the Ontario Heritage Act over the last, 3 to 4 years. One of those changes was that each property within a heritage conservation district has to be individually inventoried to demonstrate how it contributes, whether and how it contributes to the overall heritage conservation district. That's where a lot of those additional funds are now coming into play. So, depending on if you have 300 properties or maybe you're just studying a smaller area with 100 properties, the range is quite large just based on, how many properties have to individually be assessed, documented, analyzed, right?
Gotcha. Understood. Thank you for that. Just one couple last things. I found the walk in Collingwood, what they've done with their downtown there is really quite remarkable from a heritage conservation perspective, and very impressive for staff. Sometimes, Jay, maybe your staff may want to venture over there, maybe already have. It's very impressive. And one of the things they talked about was, and it's in one of the new policy recommendations, that the town may pass a bylaw under the Municipal Act for tax reductions for designated heritage properties. And Collingwood does that. Matter of fact, they waive fees, taxes, they freeze taxes for up to 10 years, depending on the level of contribution towards, improving a heritage building. So I was pleased to see that in there, because I think, and the community has really bought into that. There's been some significant contributions towards preserving heritage buildings. And there's another one, the recommendation, the town may pass a bylaw in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act, section 39.4 for the making of grants and loans. And that's something that, again, that I'm picking on Collingwood a little bit because they've done a really good job over there. That they've substantial amount of grants they've handed out to local businesses and homeowners for preserving their buildings, restoring their buildings. So I'm glad to see those two in there, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to open up a plan like that. So thanks for your report, Denise. I think it's very well done, and I think it's a great starting point to help with our future planning for culture and heritage. So thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? The Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. And through you, I was waiting to see if someone else brought the topic up, but they didn't. So the staff report indicates that despite a number of comments from council related to the willingness of a property owner to become part of the process, you've chosen to not include that kind of line of process into this report. I want to ask why, but when we first started to build a heritage register here, we were very clear in setting it up that we wanted supportive properties to celebrate a heritage, and we didn't force it down anybody's throat per se. And I appreciate in particular Councillor Grace's work over the last couple of years to get a few more properties designated. But again, I come back to we built a solid heritage register with supportive property owners. So what we're setting up now in this document, and perhaps it's provincial legislation. I don't know if that is totally the way that it is, or if we have some discretion. But I'll use my own street, Palmerston Street in Southampton. It's a street with 6 or 7 yellow brick houses that were all built by David Gray about 130 years ago, approximately, almost all of them. And I don't know if Gray Street in Southampton is named after him or not, but somebody could come along and say, that house should be designated. And I'm curious to know what kind of rights a property owner would still have if a third party decides that they think somebody's house should be designated. We've never really done that here before, and we built a whole program not doing that. And, you know, I believe in the rights of private property owners. I also respect the heritage value of buildings and that sort of thing, but why is it still in here that the expressed support or interest of a property owner to pursue designation is not necessary to proceed? Council did express that we were concerned about that, but it's been specifically noted that was not built into this. And I would like to know if, in passing this, if somebody other than a property owner determines that they think a property should be designated, just spell it out for me, please. What that means in terms of that private property owner having the ability to say, hang on a second, I'm not too sure I want this, or I don't want this. How does that work with a third party putting forward a request to designate? So there's two questions there. I don't know if it's a Jay question or not, but maybe Jay, you can start. Thank you.
Yes, I think Denise and I work better in tandem, so I'll do my best to provide the sort of our perspective, and then Denise can talk about well, whatever I miss. So, I mean, from what I recall at our January meeting was that it was expressed that built cultural heritage, which is the main subject of this plan, is a community interest. And if it's considered a community interest, and we're developing what we would in the planning side would talk about good planning, we need to develop, we think we should be recommending policy that reflects the cultural or municipal interest of the community. And that's not to exclude landowners that just don't like it. I guess, so that's the base of the analysis. I guess what I'd like to say is that it's still ultimately council's decision. We only recommend. And so when we develop the internal procedure, or the procedure rather, that we think should be taken, it'll be presented to council. If one of the things you want is landowner consent documented, you'll be aware and have that ability to direct it up front. We haven't presented that. We've got a recommendation. So there's the sort of that difference from my perspective. Denise?
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor Huber. So I want to be really clear here that when we had originally sort of discussed this topic, it was in relation to council having an express policy, as in, so like a written policy that says that council will not designate it if an owner is not in support of that designation. And what we wanted to show in this plan is to caution council that there has been legal decisions that would show that to have an express written policy is contrary to the intent of the Ontario Heritage Act. So we wanted to just demonstrate to you there is case law on this to say that council has a mandate, right, to consider cultural heritage conservation and the public interest and the importance of cultural heritage to the entire community, but as well as the property owner. So I just want to be clear that the intent of this plan is not to hold council to anything specific to that, but to say, this is what we've seen. And I think if council has very specific concerns still, then I would encourage you to reach out to your solicitor on this specifically and get some legal advice on this. And then the other thing that I would say to you is council could absolutely develop a process for how to handle third party, or what are sometimes referred to as hostile designation requests. And I'm dealing with a situation right now in another municipality where there is not an established process. And a property owner had somebody submit a third party request with very little information to substantiate why the designation was put forward. And so there's a concern of, well, is it frivolous? Is it vexatious? Why was this even put forward? And the name of the person who put it forward wasn't even released, right? So I agree, there's concern about sort of who's putting forward designations and why. So council could put together essentially a process that says, these are the things we're going to think about when we get a third party request. to help us make a decision as to how we're going to move forward and handle that third-party request. So maybe it's, you know, something is submitted to council and council looks at it through their processes and says, you know, there's really very little information here. Or if council develops their priority designation process, if you go through that and say, we've got a priority designation process, this property isn't on it, we're not going to consider it right now. That is council's prerogative to make that determination and whether or not to serve notice of intent to designate, right? So council is the one that determines whether or not makes the decision under the Ontario Heritage Act, whether or not to serve notice of intent to designate, which is what commences that designation process. So some municipalities may receive a third-party request and say, before we move anything under the Ontario Heritage Act, we want to talk to that property owner. Let's engage with them. Let's inform them about the benefits of designation. So let's see if they're interested in designation, if they have questions about it. Let's tell them about the interesting programs we have to help support designated properties before even moving into the Ontario Heritage Act processes. So those are options. There are many things that council can consider. And of course, yes, engage early with property owners. Even if council moves to serve notice of intent to designate, as you're all aware, under the Ontario Heritage Act, owners have the ability to object, right? And council can therefore decide not to move forward with a notice of intent. They can withdraw a notice of intent to designate, right? So there's lots of ways to deal with this, whether it's under the formal processes or if council determines that they want to sort of develop their own process for third-party requests.
I think the better path forward is to, as the Vice Deputy Mayor said, you know, get a couple of programs in there that make it more attractive to go through with the process. So, you know, tax situations, grants, that sort of thing. So thank you for the answer.
Might just follow up on that. Like first, I like the report is very good, and it's good to have this in place, and by and large very supportive of the work that's been done. But I share the concern. So I appreciate the jurisprudence on the question, and that there's some concern about a policy whereby we would say proactively that we would not consider a designation for a property where the property owner objected to that designation. But I also think that, so, and maybe it's the way to talk about it is that, you know, the manager talked about the community interest, right? And what is the community interest? And that's what this is about, is the community's interest in heritage. And so I think what we need here, and I don't entirely see it, honestly, in this plan, and it's concerning to me, is we need to bring the decision as early as possible to the forum where the community's interest is determined, council, right? Like council is the body vested by the community to determine the interests of the community, right? And so, like, even you were talking earlier, Denise, about the updating those designation bylaws that we already have in place. And the language you use there when describing that is the Heritage Committee and staff can consider that. I'm concerned about that. Like, I'm concerned about seeing the existing designations cracked open by the committee. And a whole bunch of work progressing without council's awareness. And because any number of pressures and problems can be exerted on that property owner through that process. I would say, if we're going to review a designation, it should come to council first. The very first step in the process should be council, where council would say, yes, we're going to open that designation bylaw, and we would direct the committee to commence the work. It would be the same with Heritage Register, with looking at designating these properties that are on the current register right now. In the action plan, item 5, prioritize properties for designation from the Heritage Registry. The responsible partners are town staff and the Municipal Heritage Committee. I don't see council. And council, like, we created those registries here at council, and we did so, as the Deputy Mayor pointed out, with voluntary partners who understood that we were registering them, not designating them. And now we're going to open the registry up and start designation processes because we're worried about 2027. Like the province made that decision. It's the decision. And it's going to happen. I don't want to turn that into a war with everybody on the heritage registry. Just like suddenly because they did that, now we have to race to try to designate them. I would say if we should, if we want to look at designating properties that are on the heritage registry, then the committee should put together whatever list they have, whatever ones they want to look at. And the first step should be council, should come to council, and we should decide whether any of those are going to proceed or not. And then they can proceed. And then, and again, new designations or any new designation, frankly, but hostile ones in particular. Again, somebody from the community, which is their right, writes a letter and says that XYZ property should be designated. The first step, before anything is done, before any step is taken, should be, it should come to council and council should decide. We should ask that property owner, do you object to this? And that could be one of a number of considerations council might have in terms of whether to proceed, but I'm certain it would be one. And then we would decide, okay, you know, even though you object, Mr. Smith, this is such an important property, we need to consider designation, or thank you for your objection, Mr. Smith. We think that's compelling. We're not going to proceed with designating your property. Anyway, in all of those items I've referenced, council should be the first stop. And I don't see that in this plan. What I see is the Heritage Committee, town staff, but the venue for deciding community, the interest of the community is here at council, and no designation should be pursued, in my view, without this being the first stop. So everybody has comments now. I've created a whole bunch of comments. I'll go to the manager and then I'll come to Councilor Grace.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you deferring to me first because I think that it's in the plan and this is just highlighting in this particular case, page 75, it says council endorsed heritage process. Like, I don't know, maybe I take it for granted or I'm not intending for me to perceive that, but it says the action there is council endorsed heritage processes. It says the responsible partners, town staff, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't come to council to seek approval. So we would write a report. We would consult Heritage Committee, maybe not in this particular process, but in other ones, that's how I see these recommendations. They're all filtered and maybe it wasn't emphasized enough. I don't know if you want to amend the plan or I guess I just don't want to go away and have to come with another plan again. But that's my answer. So,
but if I could just respond, like there's literally a page here. It's page, scroll the corner, page 58, where there's a flow chart that shows the process for designation. And council doesn't come into it until the very last step. Designated initiated by the municipality, a third party or owner, and then staff review it, and then they prepare a share, who's also a great pop star. And then they create a designating bylaw by legal counsel. Then it goes to the Heritage Committee, and not to the very last step does council come in. So like this is literally in the plan right here, the flow chart, the process for a designation. So this is where my confusion comes from. Like it's council is specifically delegated to the last step in the process. And what I'm saying is it should be the first step. So I have trouble with the plan because the plan specifically puts council at the end. Am I wrong?
no, I mean, you're not wrong. I guess I'm trying to offer a way to guide a decision and I appreciate your input. My answer is that it's still on the premise and the entire legal section that talks about the provincial says is council's decision. The way you express that particular recommended process, I guess I'm saying is you're not actually approving the process if you adopt the plan, because there's another action that to me is more detailed where we're going to provide a recommended process and you can tell us that you're better at the front and the back end. And I guess, but if it's easy enough to strike this particular picture from the plan, I prefer that. So.
Okay, understood. Councilor Grace?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on that question, but I have another one. that I forgot to ask earlier. But that's the process we do now. I mean, I'm not saying that it's right, but council is the last step. Somebody expresses interest, they start talking to the committee, they end up making a presentation to the committee, they get feedback on the application, and then with the committee's recommendation, it comes before council. Now, I'm just saying that's maybe the framework that staff was looking at. I have a question that I need to ask Denise, I guess. I forgot to ask this. Your recommendation that we update all of these old designating bylaws for properties that the current bylaws are inadequate for whatever reason. Are we doing this because we're anticipating that, or we want to protect these designations in the event of some kind of legal challenge in the future? Is that why we're recommending doing this?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Grace. So yeah, it's a question. It's a question to think about as to whether you would like to designate or to update the designation bylaws. However, the rationale is that at the moment, there are no statements of cultural heritage value or heritage attributes for some of the designation bylaws, which means that heritage attributes on the properties aren't protected right now, right? So the Ontario Heritage Act operates on the definition of real property, right? So alterations to real property. And the way to assess impacts and whether whether either a heritage permit or municipal approval is required to alter a heritage property is whether it is likely to affect or whether it will demolish or remove heritage attributes. And there aren't heritage attributes listed. Now, that's not the case for some of the newer designation bylaws, as we've noted, right? So there's that. And then, yes, you're right. The second consideration is, I know you have a lot of willing heritage property owners for those that are already designated. If a property was to change hands, go to a new property owner who maybe was not in agreement with the heritage designation on the property, they could challenge that designation. And there's nothing to substantiate the designation, right? So it puts you in a not a very comfortable situation if that were to happen. So there's a few reasons why it would be worth the time to update the designation bylaws with willing property owners. Yeah.
Councillor Halpin?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Is there an opportunity for us to entrench the property owner's rights in this so that they can't be forced into a designation? Because we could say, oh, well, council has that opportunity and we would ask the person, but what about a future council that isn't so considerate or concerned about that? Because, you know, truly, like, to me, and I think to a lot of people at this table, property rights are very important.
I think we've heard pretty clearly from staff and from the consultant at this point that there's legal peril in doing that, right? That we would, if we were to entrench that or try to, it could be challenged. Our ability to do that could be challenged. I think we've heard pretty clearly from the consultant that would be a risky gambit to try it that way, which is why I'm suggesting, since we can't place a guarantee that we're not going to designate, the best thing we can do then is to put it in the hands of the people who are most accountable to the people, council. And I would trust this council and all future councils to make up the right balanced decision in the interest of the broader community. Like that's, you know, council's the body that is responsible. And so the responsible body should choose. And I would say it's true that our current process is that the committee proceeds and we get it at the end, but we haven't up until now been discussing opening the existing designations, designating off the register. or the potential, and we've been pretty consistent in none of those have been proceeded that are against the wishes of the property owner. Like, I have not seen the committee attempt to designate a property where the property owner was against it. I think that that is a legitimate possibility now. And so I think at minimum, we should direct that in the event that the Heritage Committee says, or that we would like to consider designation of a property where the property owner is an objection to that, that it should, at that point, that should be a red line, and that it should immediately come to council. And that council should decide if it proceeds one step farther than that or not, because it's a very serious matter at that point, and council is the best body to deal with very serious matters. So I would like to see that entrenched. I hear what Jay is saying. Certainly appreciate his comments that we're going to approve a process at some point after this, that this is no process. I don't know how long it takes to get that process. I don't know what happens in the interregnum between now where we adopt a cultural heritage master plan and when we finally get that process. I'd prefer the process to be in the plan so it was super clear right off the bat what we were going to do. I don't know. I think it's a very serious matter and something council's concerned about, talking about how we're going to do this in a way that balances our responsibilities under the Heritage Act and, to the best of our ability, protect the private property rights of our residents. I'm just not certain I'm prepared to adopt the plan, the policy as it stands today, until we get some clarity, until we have the policy in there. Because I don't know what happens in the interregnum after we pass this. You know, I don't know. Maybe you can give me some comfort, Jay. Jay, comfort me. Tell me how I can support this thing.
I would comfort you at all times, Mayor.
Okay.
But in this case, I think I am, if I don't know if it's permissible to work on a change to the resolution. I'm kind of hopeful we maybe don't need to defer this. I'm sort of thinking along the lines of a suggestion is that you could amend the recommendation to include a line that says that further that council direct at all, because I think we're really just talking third-party ones at this point. Like, you're either landowner initiated, they're clearly the landowner likes it. Council directed, because you're in control as it is. These are the third party, which may be low risk, but it would be like you direct it until a procedure is formally approved that all third party requests for designation proceed to, I'm looking at language here, start a council before proceeding for further consideration. And you that's your interim recommendation until the final procedure is presented.
My preference, I'm concerned also about the register. Honestly, the register really concerns me because of the promises we made when we created it. So my preference would be to say in the interim that all designations that are initiated, before they're initiated, come to council until we have a formal process approved. I don't know, that's my thought. I think that would give me the comfort to pass it or to vote for it. Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, you're concerned about properties coming off the registry to be designated as well, not just if we do a future list of a future phase to go on the heritage registry.
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about adding future phases to the registry. I'm worried about selecting properties from the registry to designate.
Right.
I'm not saying I oppose that. I'm only saying that I would like council to see the proposed properties and approve them before any work is done on them. So that would be my preference, but only my preference, the deputy mayor.
I might have the language wrong, but I think there's something embedded in here about prioritizing properties. So would what you're saying just suggest that the Heritage Committee, which would likely be the body that is doing that work and prioritizing, that they would then bring that list to council or that priority ranking to council before moving ahead on anything? I would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. I would say in the case of the registry, the Heritage Committee looks at the registry, says we want to pursue designation on these 5 or 10 properties or whatever they are. that's our idea. We're not doing any work. We're going to go to council, say to council, we're doing that work on this. We review it. We probably ask the property owners. We ask for that opinion, and then we say yes or no. And then if we say yes, committee goes off and does the work. Or if we say no, they don't. And so that's for now. I would just say in the interregnum, all Heritage Committee, bring us all your designations before you pursue them. And then once we get and that's up until we get a process. Once we have a process, the process will supersede that. Who wants to move that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so so the motion would be then the council adopt the cultural heritage master plan. And so what you're moving is an amendment. And the amendment would be that council directs that while a policy for heritage designations is developed, that all designations be brought to council before they are pursued. Is that clear? You have better, Don, give me better words for that.
If I may, through you, Mayor Charbonneau, to ensure we have proper clarity, when we say all designations, it sounds like all designations, regardless of the catalyst for them coming forward. And so I believe that there needs to be some clarity into the resolution from council, or the amending resolution specific to that it is designations from the registry being initiated by the Municipal Heritage Committee, if that is the intention.
I think in my view, it's not just the registry, it's also those ones that are opposed by property owners, which is why I just said all. I don't think there's any risk in making it all, but I don't know, I'll turn it over to the mover.
I think that's a good insurance that things are going to work well until the policy's developed. And to put it in context too, like in the 2 years I was there were 3 designations. So it's not like this is going to put an onerous task on council to until something is ironed out, to just have this one little step in there. Thank you.
So that's moved by Councillor Halpin. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Grace. Is there further discussion on that? So this is to amend the resolution, to add that. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, so we'll move on to the main question then, that council adopt the cultural heritage master plan and that all heritage designations are brought forward to council for consideration prior. And that's been moved by Grace and Stack. Is there further discussion on the main question? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you all very much. Okay, so now we're on to 7.3, Blue Water District School Board Administrative Procedure for Holding Zones and Holding Schools. And we'll turn that over to our Development Services Officer, Candace Ham.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My report this evening is on the Blue Water District School Board Holding Zone and Holding School Administrative Procedure. On April 10th, 2025, a notice of adoption was forwarded to the town indicating that the school board administrative procedure for holding zones and holding schools was adopted by the school board on November 27th, 2024. The procedure is a new tool that can be used by the school board to help mitigate enrollment pressures. The procedure includes guidance on a recommended clause to be included in subdivision agreements and establish formal guidelines for the school board to designate holding zones and holding schools. As of the date of writing this report, the Blue Water District School Board has not designated any holding zones or holding schools in the town of Saugeen Shores. First, I'll speak to the holding zone subdivision agreement clause. The example wording of a condition of approval that may be recommended by the school board for inclusion in a subdivision agreement between a developer and the town is included in the procedure and is noted in my report. As part of the regular Planning Act process, applications are circulated to the Blue Water District School Board by the County of Bruce. When schools are at risk of exceeding their capacity, the school board will recommend a condition of approval that will require developers to clearly inform prospective homebuyers that the property may be designated as part of a holding zone and that students may be temporarily assigned to a holding school until a permanent accommodation solution is established. I note that in 2023, the town of Saugeen Shores passed a resolution requesting that the County of Bruce remove the Blue Water District School Board capacity conditions from draft plans of subdivision within the town of Saugeen Shores. Shortly thereafter, the County of Bruce passed a resolution directing staff to strike requested school board conditions regarding school capacity from all land vision applications in Bruce County. I can confirm that the direction from County Council is being upheld by county staff for draft plan approvals within the town. The staff recommendations related to the holding zone subdivision agreement clause are that the town and the Blue Water District School Board work together to strengthen our relationship and enhance our partnership, that the Blue Water District School Board keep open lines of communication with the town regarding anticipated impacts to student enrollment numbers and school utilization resulting from new development proposals, and that the town, in conjunction with the County of Bruce Planning and Development Department, seek out opportunities to obtain preliminary feedback from the Blue Water District School Board during the pre-consultation stage for planning and development applications. Next, my report speaks to the designation of holding zones and holding schools. The procedure permits the Blue Water District School Board to designate holding zones and holding schools and temporarily assign students from new developments to schools with available space until long-term accommodation solutions are implemented. In the event that a holding zone is designated by the Board of Trustees, parents and guardians of any student that has a primary address in the holding zone, the owner of the property yet to be developed, if the school board is aware of such development, and the town, among others, will be notified. Saugeen Shores is the fastest growing community in Bruce County, and it stands to reason that the school board would be interested in new development proposals in the town and closely monitor enrollment numbers and school utilization. Should it be determined by the school board that one or more holding zones are required as a short-term solution to alleviate enrollment pressures in the town of Saugeen Shores, the potential impacts to the community should be closely evaluated. A number of factors would be considered by the Blue Water District School Board when determining an appropriate holding school, with the goal of accommodating Saugeen Shores students within the Saugeen District School Group. The final recommendation in my report is that the town request to be notified by the Blue Water District School Board and engaged in the process as early as possible if a holding zone is to be designated by the school board for lands within the town, and/or if a holding school is required to accommodate students within the Saugeen District School Group. Thank you for the opportunity to present my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So the recommendation is the council endorse the comments in this report and instruct staff to forward them to the Blue Water District School Board. Other questions or comments? The Deputy Mayor.
I have three, but to follow up with what Candace just said at the end about notification to us as soon as possible. In their own procedure, 3.1.7, it talks about an annual report being prepared about this topic to their own board. There's no indication of an automatic relaying of that annual report to municipalities. Could we perhaps ask for that to come here? Because it's very specific in their own guidelines document about an annual report being prepared, and going to the board. I think it might even have a date indicated, but it doesn't talk about sharing it with outside ones. So I would ask for that. I wanted to ask, though, all of this seems to be focused on future development or new subdivisions. I think we have an issue coming up with the high school in that we've now sort of shared space within the high school. We've got elementary schools in both Southampton and in Port Elgin that are at capacity or close to capacity. So the high school is going to get a big bulge soon. Do we, how does this work then? Like, how soon are we going to hear about a high school build? And if there's no capacity at the high school, where do those students fit into this whole idea of they get sent to another location? Where is that location? Is it Owen Sound? Is it Kincardine? How is there anything in here that kind of picks up on that topic? Because I think the high school is going to be an immediate problem within the next couple of years. So I just wanted to ask if this addresses that, or is it all specific to new development and basically suggesting to people who are moving into the community, but what about the ones who are already here? who have kids in the elementary system, that where are they going to go? Maybe that's a question that doesn't have an answer yet, but that's a concern I have as a member of council here. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Charbonneau, I'll try to hit all of those questions. So in the long-term accommodation strategy, the school board does make reference to a long-term need for an addition to the Saugeen District Senior School. So that is a long-term goal that's within their accommodation plan. In terms of the current procedure applies to new developments. So they're looking at specific enrollment pressures that will be the result of new development proposals for new subdivisions. They are also noting, because I have had discussions with representatives from the school board, that this would also apply to existing plans of subdivisions if they apply for a red line revision to increase density. So they've accounted for existing densities, but if there is a change to the number of units that would be part of that existing draft approved subdivision, that this could also apply. But it will just be there would be an area designated where any new enrollments resulting from new homes in a specific area may not be able to be accommodated within the existing schools or the school district. In terms of where the holding school would be located, that's something that hasn't been determined as of yet. They said they're committed to trying to ensure that they stay within the school district. But if that's not possible, then they would be looking for available space outside of the school district.
Okay, further comments, Councillor Halpin?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I think the school board has a willing partner in the town of Saugeen Shores. We are growing. New schools and additions are going to be needed. But I think a key thing is here that I'd like to, is that we need to work together. This council, like, we know the town, we have a vision for it, we have land, but we need communication with the school board. And I think the school board owes it to communicate with us, to consult with us, and work with us towards delivering these schools. And I understand that the way the funding and everything works, they have no obligation to really talk to us, but that doesn't mean that they can't. It doesn't mean that it's not a good idea. And in fact, I see that having a more open communication with the school board about these things is really in all our benefit. We're just stronger when we work together. And so I guess is there such a thing that we could ask the school board to sit and talk with us or to consult us on these things? And sure, they don't have to, but again, it doesn't mean that they can't. And it doesn't even mean it's a bad idea. I think it's a really good idea. Can we do something like that, Mayor?
Yeah, certainly we can engage with the board. I think our staff do engage with the board. I mean, there are ongoing conversations happening. And certainly there are, I think the manager of development services and other folks in the development services department are sort of engaged with the board routinely. I think council, maybe we're not as engaged in maybe board to council conversations might be more helpful. I think as you raised the point, and it's a good point, like this is something that was approved by the board quite some time ago. That's my understanding, and is only trickling to us now, well after it was adopted, which I think, to your point, Councillor Halpin, is indicative of, decisions that the board is making that have big impacts on the communities within their district, that we don't get engaged on before the discussion or during the discussion, but only we just sort of get a letter in the mail saying we've made this decision. And so I think by having more engagement in that regard would be good. And I think we could certainly find ways to ask the board to be more engaged with us as they make important decisions like that.
And just very briefly through you, and also just with this as an example, like when was this memo or this decision made, and then when did we receive it? There is a bit of a lapse of time in there, correct?
Candace will have the answer.
Yes, through you, Mayor Charbonneau. So the decision was made on November 27th, 2024. There's a notice of adoption that is dated for February of 2025, and then it came to the municipal partners in April 10th, 2025.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Davinsky.
Correct me if I'm wrong, through you, Mr. In my other life as a reporter, I remember covering the Blue Water District School Board at various public meetings outside of Saugeen Shores. And they ran into this problem out there. And they had kids, young kids, on buses at 7 a.m. and were the last ones off at 5 p.m. And they were being bussed out of their familiar area because of this holding zone and holding schools. And we've got to make every effort to make sure this doesn't happen again, particularly in Saugeen Shores. So I agree with Councillor Halpin. We have to work closely with the school board. I wonder if we could invite them to come and address council at some future meeting about what's going on, about the history that they've been through, and the effect it had on students that had no business being affected this way. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly we could proffer an invitation to representatives from the board to meet with council, either in a forum like this or in another way. But we could certainly suggest that, and we'll pass that off to staff maybe as something to take away to engage with the board on. So further comments? I think, and I want to say appreciate the work Candace has done on this, and it's I'm glad she's brought it to our attention, even though it's belated, not through her, not because of her, but because of the process that the board has gone through. But I guess my only thinking is I'm not sure I'm in support of, like, they've made this decision already, and the comments that we're submitting here are perfunctory, like comments. In my view, there's only one comment I really care to make, which is the town of Saugeen Shores opposes the creation of holding zones or the movement of children outside of our community, period. I mean, that's my position. I don't really want to work with the board on creating holding zones because I oppose holding zones. I think the message that we should send to the board is, as Councillor Halpin rightly put, if they want to build schools, they're not going to find any better partner than the town of Saugeen Shores. We will do everything we can to help them build schools in Saugeen Shores, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's zoning, whatever it is. We'll be right there to advance those projects. We'll put them to the top of the pile because we want those schools built. But if they're looking for a partner to make excuses not to build schools, then they're going to find a lot of opposition from the town of Saugeen Shores. And to me, this is and I led the push at the county to exclude these comments from our plans of subdivision, because what they're trying to do by doing that is create an alibi that they can call on down the road, 20 years down the road, when they say to so-and-so who just moves into a neighborhood, sorry, we got to send little Johnny to Owen Sound to go to kindergarten. They want to be able to say, oh, don't blame us. It was in the subdivision agreement we signed 20 years ago that you didn't read, that nobody ever reads. It was in the fine print of a subdivision agreement. And so, not our fault, right? So I don't want to play any part of that. That's why that's why I pushed it. I pushed hard for a long time to push it out of our subdivision agreements. It's not there. And I'm also not interested in a process where we're like talking to them about when they should alert us about the holding zones they're creating. I think instead we should just say, don't create holding zones. We oppose holding zones. Build schools. We support building schools. Want help with that? Come see us because we're going to help you. So I'm not going to vote in favor of the resolution, not because I don't like your work, Candace, because I do like your work, but because I don't support these comments. I would make other comments, but I'm not sure any comments are very useful at this time. I just made a comment. I'm sure somebody will hear it eventually. Because they've already made this decision, and really this is their sphere and they can do what they want, whether we support it or not. But I think down the road, if they do choose to do this, that's when we'll get engaged, and push back hard against any holding zones. I'm going to vote against the resolution. Councillor Help.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Is there something, if we vote against this, is there something positive we can send back to them, like requesting to meet with them?
Yeah, I think based on your comment, I've made the request to staff to pursue that meeting between council and board representatives. So we will pursue that for sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Grace.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you about opposing holding zones, but I think we need to make it clear that we oppose it for all children, not just children in Saugeen Shores. So and by showing opposition to the general policy, that's implied, but I don't want them to be taking away, well, we're okay as long as it doesn't happen to kids in Saugeen Shores, that this is something that we don't approve for children throughout the district.
Yeah, fair enough. Certainly agree with that. And that's been my position at the County of Bruce. The Deputy Mayor.
I don't know when or how it should happen, but we should make sure that our MPP is aware of our position on this, because ultimately schools are funded by the Ministry of Education and she's our provincial representative. So whenever we get to the end result, I would certainly like to make sure that she's aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Thank you.
And Councillor Mayat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Not only the MPP, I think we should alert the Premier that this is going against his priorities for housing, because it's doing nothing but stifling development of subdivisions, because developers are going to say, I'm not going to build a subdivision over here if there's no schools for those kids to go to. So it's in direct violation and conflict of the provincial priorities for housing.
I think, and just to put a little balance and fairness to both the board and to the province, they have committed recently $20 million to build a school in the town of Saugeen Shores. So they are pursuing that here, and I think they are going to pursue it, and they've shown every willingness to do that. And I want to give them their due, because I strongly support what they've done there. And I just hope what this is about is further in the future, maybe the high school situation that the deputy mayor talked about. So I think we want to, that's why I say I want to do both. I want to oppose holding zones, and I want to support school construction. I want to support the board. What the board's doing there is, in terms of building schools, is great. And we want to be right there with them, but we don't want them going the other way. So there's a positive and a negative in this from my perspective. The deputy mayor.
So if we effectively vote this down, what would be the next step that the message gets conveyed appropriately? Is it something we, I know we haven't taken the vote yet, but I don't want it to happen and then just be gone. Like, what would happen after that?
Well, I think we have a good path forward, thanks to Councillor Halpin. I would say my view is I'm going to vote against this. If it's defeated, we're going to try to get, well, even if it's defeated or it's passed, we'll try to get a meeting with board representatives, and we can convey our thoughts to them directly that way. Hope for that meeting. And if we don't get a meeting, then we'll find other ways to convey our thoughts to them. Okay. Any further discussion? Yeah, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Well, so I'm clear though, before the vote's taken, the council endorsed the comments in this report, right? So that's your point, is with the holding zones, endorsing the comments, we're really supporting the candidates saying about holding zones, correct? That's what I'm reading. I just read through it again here, and that's what I'm seeing, that we're endorsing those comments, and there's all kinds of explanation about holding zones, and the procedure permits the Blue Water District School Board to designate holding zones, holding schools, etc. So that's your point, correct? If we approve this recommendation, we're really saying that we're endorsing those comments. So, right? I just want to be clear on what I'm voting for and against here.
My view is that, particularly that recommendation 4, we're saying to them, consult us about holding zones, make sure to tell us about when you're going to create a holding zone. And that's kind of us, to me, that feels like participating in the whole holding zone process. Whereas my view is I prefer not to say any of that I prefer not to make any comment, frankly, but if we were going to make a comment, it would be we oppose holding zones, full stop. So I'd rather not be part of the holding zone process. And we don't have to be because it's their process. So we could just stay silent and if they ever try to do a holding zone, then we come here and we say something about it. Okay? So if there's nothing further, you've heard the recommendation. I'll ask all in favor. Was there a mover and seconder for the resolution? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Halpin. All in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. Okay, so now we'll move on to the consent agenda. Just one item there. Does anybody need to make any comments on it? If not, there's a resolution. Oh, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Well, just, Mr. Mayor, that it's good to see this development moving forward, and it'd be 11 families moving to these residents, and I think that's a good thing for Saugeen Shores. So I want to thank Jay for all his hard work on this one, and I'm assuming it was Jay, was it? and the investor there, Kevin O'Brien, I know has worked hard on this development, and it's good to see this moving forward.
Okay, anything further? The Deputy Mayor?
Oh, in the agreement, item 11 talks about if there's a default, but there's no indication of what the penalty is. Just is it possible to get a comment on just the vagueness of why there's nothing specifically indicated there? Are you deferring back to the municipal solicitor? Okay.
Solicitor?
That working? Yep. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can respond to that inquiry. So in terms of this agreement, you'll note that there were no incentives provided for the requirement for the rental component. And as a result, in typical agreements, we would a remedy would be that any money that they received as an incentive would be go back to the municipality. So in this particular case, what we have is a situation where we have a contract between two parties, and it will flow to any successors in title. And so if there is a breach, it's a breach of the agreement, and there would be civil remedies through the court system that would be sought by the town.
Okay, Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So, so we didn't waive anything for this. This person just did this basically to be a good corporate citizen. Is that correct?
The manager.
Well, I guess I don't characterize it that we had a subdivision agreement that both the town and the developer agreed to do. So, and this was discussed through the planning process that there would be a number of units that were townhouse that could be set aside as rental, and we chose to implement it through the subdivision agreement and then this agreement. So.
Well, hats off to him for doing that and to the staff for helping to facilitate that. It's good news. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? So the resolution will be that the items in the consent agenda are approved. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Davinsky, second by the Vice Deputy Mayor. All in favor? That is carried. And then the confirmatory bylaw, the bylaw 56-2025, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores, hereby read, passed, and sealed this 20th day of May, 2025. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Gray, seconded by Halpin. All in favor? Carried. And finally, there's a resolution. This regular council meeting of May 20, 2025 hereby adjourns at 9:41 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Duhaime and Mayette, all in favor. Council stands adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.